I'd like to call the City Council meeting of November 24th, 2015 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco? Hart? Here. Hotchkiss? Here. Murillo?
Here.
Rouse? Here. White? Here. Mayor Schneider?
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda? Mr. Casey, any changes to the agenda? Thank you. Okay, public comment. We have a large number of speaker slips. We recently updated our council procedures. The way it works is we're going to hopefully get through this. We have under our council procedures up to half an hour, and I know we have more than 15 slips here, so you're entitled for up to 2 minutes. But if we get to that half-hour point, we'll see where we are, and if there's too many, then we may push the other public comments to the end of the other items on the agenda. So that's how our new rules work. So brevity is good. We'll get your point, but obviously you are welcome to get your 2 minutes if you need them. So we'll start with Wayne Scholes, to be followed by Cassandra Ensberg.
Yeah, because Thanksgiving's 2 days away, I'm here to give thanks, along with thousands and thousands of other Santa Barbarans, to the Santa Barbara police officers that accomplished what our current mayor, our former mayor, our current city administrator, and our former city administrator, and other so-called leaders of this city didn't have the guts to do, and that's get rid of Scam Sanchez, the chief of police. I wish he was here today so I could tell him personally, we didn't buy into that big lie about life is precious and life is short. A vote of no confidence from the police officers would have forced Mr. Casey to fire him. And I suggest the next person we fire, we actually look in and investigate what kind of person we're getting. Instead of a self-serving chief of police, we need a public-serving chief of police. And I also want to say every single time a politician talks about public safety as my number one concern, ask him why we had to put up for 15 years with a chief of police that would violate not only mine but other people's civil rights and be covered by the district attorney's office, the city administrator, the mayor, and everybody else in this city. We've got rights that are supposed to be protected by the law. We've had a chief for 15 years that got exactly what he wanted, the $500,000, 2% that the city forgave half of, if I understand right. How many other people that work for this city are going to get a car with a public employee to go pick up a family member because they had an accident that caused them to go to the hospital when they were almost immediately released? The city needs to wake up, support the police officers. They're glad that little rat's gone. We're glad that little rat's gone. And we just don't need another rat to take his place because he did exactly what all other rats do on a sinking ship. He jumped off before it sank on it.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Cassandra Ensberg will be followed by Scott Wentz.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council. I am here representing the Architectural Foundation of Santa Barbara, and it's been another year, so I'm here to, I think you all know that the Architectural Foundation, the purpose is to educate about the importance of architecture and design excellence in the built environment, and we have a number of programs that we do to do that, and Kids Draw Architecture is one of them, and so I'm here again to bring you your calendars for 2016, and they are, this is our 27th edition, and they're available at the Book Den, at the Museum Bookstore, at the Architectural Foundation, and at Chaucer's, and also the Unitarian Society, if anybody's interested in supporting. And so I hope you enjoy them, and I'd also like to invite you all to come to our reception. The Kids Draw reception is on December 11th at the Architectural Foundation from 5 till 7. And we'll be celebrating the kids. So please join us, and please do enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Wentz will be followed by Richard Robinson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wens representing Cars Are Basic. Thomas Paine in The American Crisis said, "To agree with a man who has renounced the use of authority of reason and whose philosophy consists in holding humanity in contempt is like administering medicine to the dead or endeavoring to convert an atheist by Scripture." It would appear that the council majority holds the people of the city of Santa Barbara in contempt when it comes to bull bouts. I was at SB CAG this last week, and what do I see on the consent calendar? The same thing that we would have hoping that the SB CAG would have pulled off, which is bull bouts at Voluntario and Carpinteria Street. Guess what? There's no accident issue at Voluntario and Carpinteria Street with pedestrians. You also know by our letter, by the way, I want to correct that, the letter that we sent in, not on September 14th, but 24th of 2012, proved that the city of Santa Barbara claims that they had studies proving pedestrians are safer in bull bouts was false. You've got a real problem on your hands. It appears that your staff is spinning out of control. What does it take? Councilman Rouse, Councilman Hotchkiss were voted on this council to vote against bull bouts. If Mr. White, in his consulting business, were to give advice to a construction company to go ahead and build something that's going to cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars and wouldn't produce any results, he wouldn't have a job very soon. Mr. Hart is on SB CAG. He knows all of the information. He knows that there is no such information. And you, Madam Mayor, say you make your decisions based upon the best available information. There is no information for bull bouts.
Richard Robinson will be followed by Kurt Magnus.
Honorable Mayor, members, the Santa Barbara News Press last week reports that the London Times is accusing Hillary of being mentally retarded. Pardon me for laughing about the estate. The London Times is accusing Hillary of being mentally handicapped through the Santa Barbara News Press. But also another article today in the Santa Barbara News Press is very interesting. Because Federal Reserve Chairwoman Yellen says the rock bottom rates are needed to boost the economy after the subprime crisis, she's forced to send a letter to Ralph Nader telling me I had a little run-in with Mr. Nader in 1979. He tried to knock my block off because he... Ma'am, because your constituents are enabled to make large consumer purchases, homes, yachts, automobiles, affordable, and are also making those constituents of yours able to invest in business, Yellen knows what she's doing. Pardon me for yelling. But, of course, I've been a critic of Mr. Nader and his insipid attacks on the business community of the United States of America since he destroyed General Motors, the Corvair in 1970. Pardon me for preaching. I've often asked why Nader did not attack the Volkswagen, smaller. I'm not going to accuse the idiot of being a communist, but pardon me. Thank you.
Kurt Magnus will be followed by Kenneth Flock.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I want to thank you for your time in regards to this subject, the Douglas Fine Preserve Trails Restoration Project. I got a letter from Jill Zachary saying they're putting the project on hold.
You need to use the mic. Can't hear you. Thank you.
We heard you. Go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, I got a letter from Jill Zachary saying that the Parks Department has put the project on hold, which I think is a great idea. I'm just kind of wondering, what does that really mean? They were going for a grant from the state. I wonder if that was, the application was withdrawn or not. I have here over 200 signatures that I want to acknowledge the friends of the preserve, their hard work at collecting these signatures. I just want to thank, it seems that democracy is actually working in this particular case, and I wanted to thank any of the council members if they had anything to do with the decision by the Parks Department to shelf this project. And hopefully hopefully it won't come back, but if it does, we'll have a little bit more transparent communication between the public, the neighbors, and Parks Department as to what they are proposing. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss, you had a question?
Mr. Magnus, if I could. You mentioned you had a couple of hundred signatures. What do those signatures request or require?
These signatures, I can give them. I can have.
No, I don't need them, but I'm just saying, what are they supporting?
They want the project stopped. They don't want to have the trails restored or destroyed, as we say. They don't want to have the park changed in any way.
Thank you.
There's an online petition also.
Thank you.
Over 500 people
Thank
so
you.
far. Thank you.
Kenneth Locke will be followed by Phil Walker.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I have a sign that I've been flying on my bike for a couple of weeks, maybe or so now. It kind of came to me. It's nice being free, a person who's free, who meditates kind of daily and receives new insight and all that. It's been a pleasure for me to actually been blessed with that. And one day back a couple of weeks ago, this kind of came to me. It's I got a sign that says got creepy. And it just turns out that really nobody needs to be creepy, whatever, nobody. But I'm sorry to say that our educational system is probably at fault. When it comes to the subjects that are teaching right now, the problem with them is that they really don't recognize the meaning, what the meaning is, and then the whole basis of having a meaningful relationship with, say, a discipline or a subject, then you have kind of a complete understanding of what you're dealing with. But the problem is if you have a subject or a discipline that doesn't really recognize its meaning, and then right there, then the knowledge is relatively baseless. And it actually, the idea of, I was thinking today, the idea of when a person actually recognizes the fact of the reality of that they are mentally retarded, such as Hillary Clinton, and the idea that when a person actually comes to that realization, and I'm hoping that for us collectively we can actually recognize that, and then what I've been blessed with is the connection between being mentally sound and also physically sound. So right now, in relation to like the arts and sports right now, there's no soundness for the children to develop. Thought I'd share that with you today. Thank you.
Phil Walker will be followed by Melody Baker.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This happened probably in 1985 at the not-so-deluxe Green Trailer Park. A co-worker drove in. He lived there with his wife, I think his young son at the time. This is how it was there. And apparently some guy was blocking the road with his personal vehicle, and Holly drove in his truck and yelled out the window and yelled at the guy, and they got into a little bit of verbal interaction. You know, he made some choice comments about the situation. Next thing you know, the guy reached in the window, the driver's window, and cleaned Holly's clock, knocked him out cold. His head wound up against the steering wheel and the horn, blaring away. So his wife came out, threw a bucket of cold water on him, brought him out of the unconscious state. So, you know, that's how it used to be. They had every code violation in the book. So I consider it a good cleanup, and it's a done deal. Like the project manager, Bill, said, it is what it is, and it's going to be what it is. So, you know, they have the best perimeter foundations I've ever seen for that size structure. And you get a tsunami run-up or a down gradient flood flow, and you know, they need to come up with a breakaway system. The tops will float off and leave the foundation there. One other quick thing, Mr. Tito at Marburg asked me to speak about this briefly. The palm fronds in the green waste, they've had multiple hundreds of calls about people not having their green waste picked up recently because they're fronds or the seed stalks from especially the Mexican fan palms. I had some stalks that wound up in the street that didn't get picked, so I chopped them up, ground them up, and they still will not take them. They have to be in the garbage container. And he said the city needs to partner with Moorburg more and get
Thank
a
you.
good handle on this. It's a dilemma.
Thank
They
you.
had hundreds of calls in the last
Thank you,
couple weeks.
Thank you. Melody Baker will be followed by Peter Marin.
I actually got to lower my chair since I'm testing your new system.
No problem.
My chair does miracles. It goes way down, almost to the floor.
There you go. All right, now you can start.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and fellow council members, our city attorney and city manager. First of all, I got presented this because I missed the military ball down in West LA. Second of all, the reason I do not go to the rescue mission anymore, I was there one day at their drop-in center. And there's a real large crowd, and there's always a snack buffet table. And I could not get to it. And people were getting 2 and 3 plates. And I made the comment, well, I'm not going to get to eat anything. Jill Wallachek, she's the director of Homeless Guest Services. She comes out and yells across the room, "What are you, a cripple?" And I just left. And I got exited for 2 days because I got upset with her and left. Now, and she thought that was a funny joke. That's pretty sick. And the reason I will no longer be at PATH, yes, I am supposed to be there on a medical bed rest, light duty. I have only had 2 nights where I slept the whole time. I have been forced up, yelled at, and everything else. Oh, and I was accused of starting a fire. Video showed I didn't do it,
Okay, Ms.
but
Baker,
the
your time's
gentleman
up.
who
Thank you.
did got to stay.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Peter Marin will be followed by Robert Hampson.
I thought it'd be appropriate to update you on the suit that still is in progress against the city's existing RV ordinances. It's on appeal now. We are about to make our pleading to the appeals court and ask for judicial review to introduce certain information and evidence about the enforcement of existing ordinances we think were illegal and unfair. If the suit is rejected in appeals court, and this is one that I wanted to tell you, the rejection will not include 2 of the plaintiffs, one of whom is me, and we will refile in either state court or in federal court. As you may know, the court system on both the state and federal levels have become increasingly sympathetic to the plight of homeless people, have ruled in their favor in terms of sleeping in cars, have ruled in their favor in terms of sleeping and perhaps camping in the streets. So we hope on that basis to succeed. We are glad to sit down with any council members and discuss a possible settlement to the suit. All we expect is a kind of fairness and justice for the homeless in their RVs, which we don't seem able to have gotten yet. And we're not going to rest on this till this thing is decided in the courts. I presume it's going to go on and on. I wish it wasn't going to, but it will. That's all. So I want you to know that we are not phased and not tired, though we are tired, but not exactly defeated yet. Anyway, thank you.
Robert Hampson will be followed by Bill Hawksworth. Okay, so Mr. Hanson, you have up to 4 minutes.
Man, I don't know what I'm going to do with 4 minutes. I could sit there and talk to you all day, Helene, about the proclamation that you could make, because right now, Nancy mentioned last week, and I kind of interrupted it all, Continuum Care Act. Continuum Care Act, the Department of Justice and HUD are telling cities to stop criminalizing homeless. Unhoused people, they are. Just like people in houses. There's unhoused people. In cities all across America. This is not just happening here. And this is a good thing, because it's going to happen nationwide that we stop this. And nationwide, each city is going to have to deal with this and how we can get along. War is over if you want it, was a quote from John Lennon and Yoko Ono in about the 70s. There was a big billboard put on Sunset Boulevard. And we can say the same thing about this. War is over. Nobody won. Nobody's losing. We're just going to try to get along with each other. Yesterday, I was on State Street, and here's a person in a yellow shirt, and he's watching, and there's a police officer, and he's trying to catch somebody possibly with an open container. What's going to happen next year when they pass marijuana as a legal thing to do? Are we going to have no smoking in the city? That would be a start. But people are going to be, wanting to have a joint on State Street, which, whatever. But you can sit there and criticize some of these people that are alcoholics, and they're out there trying to make a little money, but it's kind of sad. I know some of these people. So basically, the city in the old days used to get people for camping or sleeping. Now they call it illegal lodging. It's a state law. And they've tweaked it a little bit. If a police officer sees a person, like a homeless person, unhoused person, just like the housed person or whatever, the housed person could probably put a blanket down and lay down in the park. But if the police officer wanted to, he could come over and give them a ticket during the daytime for illegal lodging. And this is happening. This has been happening for 10 years, illegal lodging tickets. So you are basically giving people tickets for sleeping. And back to the open container deal. Santa Barbara has the most liquor license in California. It is number 2 drunk city, right behind Santa Monica. And I think with a little bit of push and all, we could probably beat Santa Monica. We could be number 1 in both. That's kind of sad because there are replications from alcohol. People do have health issues. So the war is over. It would be nice, wouldn't it? Especially that other war that we're basically lying about. I think ISIS is the new American Indian. We came to this land and killed all these people that were here. Now we went to the Middle East, and it's sad what happened in Paris, but we were watching a documentary the other day, my wife and I, Nancy McCready, planes taking off 160 times, going out with guided bombs, hitting a building. Who knows who's in the building? It could be an ISIS person. And so they retaliate. 9/11 was a retaliation. Lois Capps even mentioned it. And I hope you get her seat, because I'd be proud to sit there and have a congresswoman like you. And I hope you do that proclamation, and I'll be here for a while asking you to. It's a simple proclamation. Let's just stop hating language, hate language. Thank you.
Bill Hawksworth, and the final speaker will be Andrea Roslinski.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here simply to say sometimes it's more difficult to keep things the way they are, and this pertains to the Douglas Preserve, than it is to change them. And I've said that before at this particular robust group of people. But again and again in Santa Barbara, a place that's driven by processes and change, it is sometimes a very difficult thing to do, to leave things as they are and not change them. Anyway, that's it. Hasta luego.
Andrea Roslinski.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, Mayor and City Council people. Well, I just want to touch a little bit. I stay out of the RV thing at most of the time, but years ago, I thought of the homeless hammock program. I thought that would be really great if a lot of homeless would have a hammock, since there's so many trees. And then if somebody was sick, if everybody knew, certain people would be designated different trees. And then if someone was sick or someone was having a seizure, like Doctor Without Walls would know where to find people. And other than that, I just want to read I want to say Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I want to read something from John, I can't pronounce his last name, this poet. Oh my God, not again. It pertains, I think, to everything here. Okay, it's called Fleeting Forms of Life, but I changed it to Change Your Attitude and Feel the Gratitude. I guess the point, I don't know if I'll get it all in 2 minutes. I guess the point is that the task would seem that much more difficult without the kind of peace they bring me, or the hope I always find in their elaborate denials and invasions, in this brief, extraordinary states that settle over me. They bring an aura of restraint, of things interminably delayed, of fantasies that organize my nights and occupy my days with dreams. I like to think of them as ways to reinvent myself, as forms that constitute a life, alternative to mine, but that convey a mood I realize can seem at times almost unreal, almost inhuman, almost willfully despondent. True, I want to rid myself of things that lent my life its savior, like those prospects of a future that disclosed as I got older, or the promises of a past that got away somehow. But after that, I want to wake into the years and slowly try to recreate my world by living in it here and now.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, that concludes public comment. On to the consent calendar. There's some items to read.
Item number 4, approval of final map and execution of agreements for 210 Meigs Road and acceptance of adjacent easement at Washington School, including recommendation B, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara accepting a new water and sewer easement on Santa Barbara Unified School District property known as Washington Elementary School, located at 290 Lighthouse Road. Item number 10, adoption of ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code pertaining to council meetings. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending Chapter 2.04 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code pertaining to council meetings.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. There's a request to ask a public comment request and a request from up here for items 4 and 6. So item 4 was just read. It's the final map of the Washington School, Meigs Road. Scott Wentz, if you'd like to come up at this point.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. Once again, this is a bulb out issue. You have no information proving that bulb outs make pedestrians safer. You do have information that a daughter and mother were injured on a bulb out on Santa Barbara and Ortega Street. You have past staff statements in contradiction to the truth, pushing these things forward. I mean, how many millions of dollars are you going to waste? A flashing crosswalk works very well. As Mr. Bailey stated regarding the crosswalk at Yananali and Melpa Street, push the button. It's worked very well. It's almost the same configuration as you have on Meigs. There's no justification for this based upon fact. You need to pull it.
Okay, Mr. Wentz, do you want to stay back up here for item 6? Why don't you read item 6, Ms. Pierce?
Increase in construction change order authority for Cabrillo Boulevard Bridge replacement, Anacapa Street crosswalk enhancement.
Okay, and someone up here wanted to pull it. Was there a question? Do you want to hear from Mr. Wentz first, or did you have a question? Mr. Hotchkiss.
No, I just wanted this to be explained by Mr. Bailey, so at the time, when the time
Okay,
comes, whenever
so
it's
Mr. Wentz,
appropriate.
since you're already up there, why don't you have your comments, and then we'll go ahead.
Again, Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. Again, this is an issue of justification. What justification do you have at Anacapa and Cabrillo Boulevard? Again, it's almost the identical configuration as on Melpa Street. Why would you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in bulb outs when you have no proof that they work. I mean, this has to stop. When you have staff going before people after 2012 and stating that we're going to make pedestrians safer, when they've already been told by the Public Works Director we have no such studies proving that they make them safer. And that's Brown and Shue and Dayton. I mean, how much money and how much disinformation can you have? You know, Goebbels was right. Tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and it'll become the truth. This item will not interfere with the bridge construction. If you pull it off, it will not interfere with it. We've already talked with the staff down at the Coastal Commission in Ventura. The bridge item and the street repair is one thing. This bulb out is something else. Do not do it.
Okay, and Mr. Hart, did you have a question on this item as well?
Excuse me, just wanted to pull item 10 too, if you
Oh,
wouldn't
okay,
mind to.
item 10.
So
All right,
nothing
well-
on this item, though.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Hotchkiss, you had...
Quickly, Mr. Bailey, I would call these bulge outs rather than bulb outs, but could you address Mr. Wenz's comments, please, in the course of your explanation, wherever you're going to do it from? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, good afternoon. My name is Derek Bailey. I'm from the city's Public Works Department, the Traffic Engineering Group. This project is the recommendation to award a construction contract for the construction of crosswalk improvements at Cabrillo and Anacapa. Just by way of background, State Street is just off the left-hand side of the screen here. And of course, the Cabrillo Bridge construction, which is ongoing right now, is just off the left-hand side as well. This project came about because of pedestrian collision history. This is consistent with our efforts to reduce pedestrian collisions in the city and to treat intersections that have a demonstrated collision history. As we were developing this project, there's certain features in it that they're there for a reason. I'll start with the curb extension on the south side of the road. Currently, there is not a curb extension. The red curb at the intersection extends quite a ways back to here, and the reason for that red curb is for sight lines, so that drivers driving down the street can see a pedestrian that's entering the crosswalk. Actually, by extending the curb out by about 5 feet, we can actually reintroduce some parking in this area too. So this is a good way to reintroduce parking. As well, the curb extension, it's bringing pedestrians closer to a driver's center of their vision, which is really important, especially on a wide street like Cabrillo. It's 75 feet wide, and it's really challenging for drivers to spot something outside of their peripheral vision like that. So when we're able to bring the starting point in, it helps with that, and it makes the flashers that we're going to install there more effective as well, because they're also...
So you are going to have flashers there also?
Will be flashers as well. And the closer...
Seems to me there are some there now, are there not?
There are not.
Aren't there flashers somewhere along Cabrillo there?
They're west of State Street. They're at Bass Street and Chapala Street.
But not down this side?
There are no flashers at Anacapa right now.
Thank you.
The curb extension along the north side of the road, that is actually being installed for partially a different reason. This is a photograph taken right in front of the Fish House restaurant. And we've got a 4-foot wide sidewalk there. It's right on the edge of the funk zone. It's seeing more and more pedestrians in that area of town. And just beyond where that lady with the stroller is, that's where all the tour buses pick up and drop off passengers when they're coming to Santa Barbara. So this really narrow sidewalk is quite taxed with the amount of pedestrian traffic on it. The only way to widen it is actually to go out into the street. And so we are planning a curb extension on that corner. It will help with pedestrian sight lines and improve the effectiveness of the flashers, but it'll also give us a nice, generous landing area in front of the fish house.
How much is that extension? The one on the other side is 5 feet. What's this one?
The one on this side of the road is closer to 10, I believe. Oh, pardon me, 7. I misread. 7 feet.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Bailey, what, in terms of lane configuration and capacity, could you review the current versus the proposed, please?
Yeah, thank you. For the eastbound direction, that's these 2 lanes. There's 2 lanes now. There'll be 2 lanes after. As Councilmember Hotchkiss mentioned, this is 5 feet wide. A typical parked car sticks out into the road 7 to 8 feet wide. So this curb extension, if you look down the projection of all the cars parked in the street, it won't even stick out as far as that. So there won't be any interference with the flow of traffic. This curb extension on the north side, though, as you can see in this picture right here, there is a right turn lane there right now. And unfortunately, the only way to provide a reasonable sidewalk width in that area is to eliminate this right turn lane. It's not a heavily used movement, and the bottleneck on this corridor is at State Street. So eliminating that right turn lane is really going to have a negligible effect on overall corridor travel times.
If I might ask, what's the volume of the right turn configuration there? Do you have any
During
idea?
the highest peak on the weekends, when during the summer, you might see about 80
per
hour.
Okay, so they're going to have to stop in the right-hand lane and traffic behind them if somebody's crossing the street.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes? No? Okay, and then there was item 10, if you could read item 10.
If I might, thank you very much for doing that, and that all makes sense to me. I understand I share usually the revulsion for bulb outs or bulge outs or whatever, but I think here it makes good sense, and it doesn't seem to be reducing traffic except for that right-hand turn lane flow.
Thank you, Councilmember Hotchkiss. Just so the council knows, we are very cautious whenever we approach a project that could include curb extensions. As you might recall, a few months ago, you awarded construction for 4 intersections, 4 pedestrian crosswalk enhancements, and of the 14 corners that we're touching at that project, there's only 1 curb extension, so we're very cautious when we use them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. White, on this item, is that?
Yes, thank
okay?
you.
Go
Just
ahead.
and this is a nit, but it's an explosive one. On page 3 of the staff report, it talks about high-pressure gasoline hanging from the bridge, and I expect the spell check didn't pick up that it's a gas line, I expect. So, and just as that goes into the archives, we might just like to get rid of the high-pressure gasoline.
Noted. Okay, item 10, if you could read item 10.
Adoption of ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code pertaining to council meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, I've had a change of mind about this item, so I just appreciate the chance to vote no. I'm just concerned. I think I expressed some concerns when we talked about this first about the limitations on public access to council meetings. And I understand that there's a tension between, us having efficient meetings and the public's opportunity to speak to us. But we've had 2 meetings since we talked about this. Last meeting, we had 2 speakers who didn't get their speaker slips in on time that weren't able to speak without being requested to by the council. And then today, we came really close to having to have the second public comment period extended into the later on. I appreciate the mayor being a little flexible about that, and I think that is a good safety valve. But I just really, in good conscience, can't support the changes that we've made to the council procedure. So I'd appreciate a chance to vote no.
Okay, is there a motion on item 10?
So moved.
Moved by Murillo, second by White. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
Okay, that's 6-1, opposed by Hart. Anything else on the consent agenda, or is there a motion to adopt the balance?
Move the remainder of the consent calendar, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Murillo, second by Rouse. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, report from the Finance Committee, Mr. Francisco.
Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee met today and carefully, painstakingly reviewed budget adjustments for the first quarter, recommended them for adoption, and I believe we just did that.
Even. Item 12.
Certification of the election results of the official canvass for the general municipal election of November 3rd, 2015. Recommendation that Council A adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara reciting the fact of the vote by mail general municipal election held on November 3rd, 2015, declaring the results and such other matters as required by the State Elections Code.
Thank you. And before we get started, there's a lot of chatter in the room. If there's some outside conversations going on, if you can take them outside of the council chambers so we can concentrate on the item, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Pierce, it's your last day. We're making you do all the jobs today from here, taking minutes, going over here, signing resolutions or passing them over. You will be missed. So good luck to you in your next endeavors, I believe in Florida or wherever they may take you. So. But you're not done yet. You have a report to give. Go right ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Gwen Pierce. I'm the City Clerk Services Manager, and we're here today just to wrap up our election from November 3rd. As you know, is our first district elections, and so we feel that everything went pretty smoothly. So we're just going to go through a few of the numbers, and we request that Council adopt the resolution today certifying those results. So as a wrap-up, so the overall election turnout for this election was 36.2%. Because it was a district election, we mailed out to much fewer amount of voters than we generally do this year. We mailed out to about 18,709 voters, the ballots for Districts 1, 2, and 3. We did receive 87% of the ballots cast were received by mail. That's up a little bit from 2 years ago. Last time it was 81%. We received about 31.5% of the ballots were received in the last couple of days before the election, and 65% of those were received in the mail. So it seems like the trend really is that people are getting used to the vote by mail election and they're returning their ballots by mail. We received 143 in the mail the 3 days following the election day. So this year was the first time that we were required to continue accepting ballots after election day that were postmarked on election day. So we had to accept them up until Friday after the election. So we did receive 143 ballots in that time period that were counted in the final count on Monday the 9th. And our final election budget looks to be coming in less than $150,000. We were budgeted $300,000, and we'll be spending less than $150,000. It looks like. We did a lot of voter outreach this time. The district elections was brand new for the voters of Santa Barbara, and so we did a lot of outreach, both to the people who were not getting ballots and then to trying to reach out to the people who did get ballots. We had a public service announcement that you may have seen on local TV or heard on the radio. It was get the ballot, fill it out, mail it in. And no, I won't sing it, but that was a really fun public service message. We wanted something to be catchy and for people to really hear it and think about it and go home and say, oh my gosh, there's my ballot, I need to mail it in. We had it translated into Spanish, and it was played on some of the Spanish radio stations as well the week before the election. So I think that was a good campaign, and we were able to use that video again for the next in 2 years from now. So that was, I think, a good thing that we did this time. We did have increased media presence, including social media. We utilized everything that we could to try to get the word out to get people to return their ballots. We had a bus ad, and that's the copy of the bus ad is right there on the slide. And we made sure it was on buses that were frequented on the east side and on the west side and on the Mesa in the three areas that people were voting. We felt that would be a high exposure for those areas. We also did a direct mail postcard to the voters in Districts 4, 5, and 6 to explain to them why they were not getting ballots. And I think it did help because we did get some calls, but I think there would have been a lot more confusion if we hadn't sent that out. So those were some of the items that we did this time to get more voter outreach. We did have drop-off centers in each district. We had one at City Hall that was open the entire week before the election, including Saturday, which turned out to be Halloween. So I don't know if we had fewer numbers because of that, but we only had 9 that came in that day. We had Calvary Baptist Church. That was our District 3 drop-off center. Holy Cross Church was our District 2, and Franklin Center was our District 1 drop-off center. And they were, what's interesting is usually City Hall is the one that everybody goes to, but it's pretty neat because they all seem to have around the same amount of people who visited them. So I think that was really effective, having drop-off centers in those centered in the 3 districts. We tried to do a comparison between the voter turnout with the districts. It's very difficult because the district boundaries, the precinct boundaries have changed. They did change when the city council adopted the district boundary map. The county had to redraw the precincts within those maps. And then we consolidate precincts so that we have fewer precincts in the city than the county does. But we've been able to try to look at some of the numbers of some of those areas. So they're not apples to apples, but we try to get a general idea. But as you can see, in 2015, we did seem to have an increase in the turnout in Districts 1 and 3. So that was the East Side District and the West Side District. And then in District 2, we had a little bit of a drop-off. But as I said, these are very general comparisons. But we wanted to try to give you kind of a comparison between the 2 years. So today we're just asking that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara reciting the fact of the vote by mail general municipal election held on November 3rd, 2015, declaring the results and such other matters as required by the state elections code. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any speaker slips on this item? No. Okay, so it's to the council. Any questions, or is there a motion?
I move the staff recommendation.
I have a question.
Okay, moved by White, second by Hart. Mr. Hotchkiss and Mr. Rouse has a question.
First off, is there any way, I'm thinking about the ballot, I don't think there's any way to know this, but was there any way to know whether the response was because we had Spanish or English in the ballots returned?
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Could we tell? Could we tell if somebody was responding because they read it in Spanish or because they read it in English, the ballot?
Oh, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Hotchkiss, I don't believe we're able to really tell that. Our process, one of the big important parts of our process is that people are voting anonymously. So we can't tell if somebody marks off the ballot. The ballots are bilingual, so they have the name,
right,
and then it has a Spanish name underneath it. So we don't really know exactly what they're reading.
That's what I thought. Second thing I wanted to say, I think it was a good idea that you sent to the non-voting districts because people were confused this first time around, and probably will be the next time also. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Ms. Pierce and her staff for bringing this new system and wrestling it down to the ground and making a rather seamless election, I thought. So well done.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, item number 13. And she'll have to get back over here to read it. It's all right.
Approval of citywide wayfinding directional signage program, including project funding and installation plan.
Okay, Mr. Allen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Browning Allen, the Transportation Manager in the Public Works Department. And with me is our consultants from Hunt Design, who the council approved their contract last January to assist us with working on this program. Jen Bressler, who's the principal in charge of the project, and Chris Helmick is one of the designers as well. So last year, council appropriated $250,000 to go towards hiring a consultant to come up with a citywide directional sign program so we can have a unified signage program to direct visitors as well as residents to different destinations. So we were able to hire the firm of Hunt Design. They've been working quite hard with us, both with the stakeholders group as well as city staff and the committee of city staff. So Jen is going to walk you through our process and what we've come up with, and at the end I'll talk about some of the numbers and some other issues that we have want some direction from council on.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. We're excited to be here today. We've spent the past 9 months working on this project, and we're excited to share with everybody our progress and thinking behind it. To start out, I think it's always a good thing to remind everybody what the project goals were, and I think this is a list that we constantly, as a design firm, test ourselves on throughout the course of the project. This is a council-driven project, as you know, in conjunction with Visit Santa Barbara. We wanted to come up with a cohesive design that's a network for vehicular and pedestrian signs throughout the city, to reduce sign clutter by combining several messages into one. We wanted to provide critical directional information at key intersections throughout the city. We wanted to create a family of sign types that maintains visual consistency, and we wanted to improve the connection between the waterfront and the downtown area. We wanted to create walking maps to help pedestrians explore more of Santa Barbara, and we wanted to optimize Santa Barbara's walkability. We wanted to turn drivers into walkers and walkers into shoppers. It might be unfair to look at these all at one time, but as you can see here, this is what exists on the streets in Santa Barbara today. It's a combination of brown, blue, and green signs that direct visitors. And some might be helpful, but I think the idea behind this is to help with out-of-town visitors, to get people to all your wonderful destinations in the downtown area. The framework for our design is really based upon the architecture in your city. We work on a lot of cities all over the world, actually, and very few still have all the existing architecture. So we took a lot of the clues from archways and tile work and the rooftops in your city. This is how we start the project. We try to come up with a network of signs that work together, from vehicular signs to pedestrian to parking directionals to pedestrian level signs. The architectural colors, as I said before, are a palette of colors at the top, and we don't have this many colors in the system, but this is how we started to define what it is that these signs should look like. And we use a lot of the reference photos from tile work to get those colors. In addition to that, at the bottom, there's a set of environmental colors, which we feel that Santa Barbara certainly says water, it says beach. It has a lot of beautiful colors in the landscape. Okay. There's a science to what we do. It's a bit of an odd job that we have, but we sit and count letters for how many lines make sense for a message and how many letters per line can fit on a sign panel. We went through did all the site work for every single location that we're identifying, and this is all part of the letter counts for how we do this. All things considered during the course of the project, we took into account the bicycle.
Could I ask you just a quick question, because you stumbled across it here? Does that mean that driving signs that, for instance, that are be used by people in a car are going to be larger and fewer words, so you can quickly get
That's
them?
correct.
Oh, got that right. Thank you.
Okay, we took into account the bicycle community has brought up their concerns. All the bicycle signs will stay. The scenic drive signs we think are important to a city, but they're not part of this project per se. But we did take them into account, and those will stay existing. Visit Santa Barbara has a wonderful red tile walking tour, and I think we use that as inspiration for one of our maps that you'll see in a little bit. Some of the other things that, Santa Barbara, we work in a lot of cities. You guys have a lot of guidelines and are really great about following them. So we use sign committee different guidelines, the MUTCD guidelines for how large types should be. In addition to that, we looked at the Harbor Master Plan, and Santa Barbara. All these different plans sort of came into play. I think this slide kind of says it all. We've gone to a lot of meetings here. We've had a wonderful ad hoc subcommittee that was made up of different members of HLC and ABR and the sign committee. We went to, these all represent all the different meetings that we went to along the way. Community stakeholder meetings, Visit Santa Barbara, Downtown Parking Committee, Transportation Circulation Committee, Historic Landmarks, ABR, and we've had really wonderful support along the way. This represents the full field of what we're dealing with here, the green representing the citywide, the brown representing the EPV area, and the blue the waterfront. And the framework for that, we feel that what's distinctive about the EPV has drawn three different color palettes for us. So on the left, the EPV sign color, in the middle, the citywide, and to the right, the waterfront. And these color palettes not only are supported in the architecture, but as well the waterfront. I know the waterfront has a wonderful yellow and blue program, so we wanted to add on to it and support it rather than replace it. You'll see at the top there's the letters Santa Barbara. Those are sort of distinctive font that we drew from the bronze lettering that's in the concrete at street corners in the downtown area. So you'll see as you go forward here how this plays out. So this is the family of sign types that will be represented in the EPV area. There's two different vehicular sign types on the left, which have larger type with short line messages. The next three are also vehicular in scale, however, have single messages or have just an icon. So for instance, to 101, we have parking directionals as well as parking lot identification signs. To the right, we have two pedestrian level signs which direct people to the great historic landmark destinations in the downtown area, and smaller pedestrian maps that would be at the mid-block crossings. Okay, and this is a example of how they would look on the street in context. And I'm not going to go through every single sign type because this is the same set of sign types, but how they'll look in the waterfront area. Again, just a shift in color. Okay, and the citywide. And this is drawn from the Malaga green that appears on all your street furniture. Okay, the pedestrian maps, I think, are an important sign type that is at a pedestrian scale. And what we've done is we've identified very clear where parking lots are. We've got a historic walking tour. We've got, as you see, that circle. We've got a 5-minute walk to give people a very clear idea of the destinations that are nearby. We did full-size mock-ups of all of our signs for HLC and ABR. These were actually done earlier on in the process with our ad hoc subcommittee, where we tested type sizes, type panel sizes for pedestrian as well as the vehicular wayfinding. We also tested out the public parking signs. There's been some discussion over whether we have a green P versus a blue P. We've had several conversations to that matter. It's gone through ABR, HLC, sign committee, and the ad hoc subcommittee all supported the green. We think both are certainly legible, but we've opted to go with the green.
Can I stop you right there, because that item has come up quite a bit to us and will be asked anyway. So I've received some correspondence saying that universally, internationally, blue is the recognizable color for public parking. Can you comment on that, or Mr. Allen, if you know anything in terms of code? And yes, if you can please put down the signs, they are distracting the meeting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start off and Jen can finish. We've done some research. There is not an industry standard in terms of the background color for a parking sign. When our staff did a search, we found all kinds of different colors.
I'm sorry, Mr. Allen, if you could just hold off just a second. Okay, go right ahead.
Anyway, so when when we did the search for international parking signs and colors, we found a variety of different colors. We found the blue, as we see here. We found green. I found red. We found yellow background. So there's not an industry standard. So it's really, we left it up to the advisory committees as well as the sign committee to select the color. We can talk about this a little bit more, but I think when we went before the sign committee, we had a conversation about it. The chair of the Downtown Parking Committee expressed a desire to have the blue background at the parking committee in September. They strongly supported having the blue background versus the green background, but there's really not an industry standard, so we were at a kind of hard to really push for one versus the other with the design review board. We're leaving it up to the design review board as well as the council to make that determination.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Okay, this represents part of the essential bid package that we're building. Hunt Design lays out all the details and sign specifications, so the signs get built to a quality standard that we would like. There's retroreflective vinyl on all the white typography on the vehicular signs. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, we've even detailed out the back of the signs with a quadrifoil design to, again, support the Spanish culture that you have here. Go ahead to the next slide. This is the secondary scale size for a vehicular sign. Again, this is just fewer messages. Directional to the 101, this is a single icon or single message level sign. You'll notice on the backs of the signs, we've actually gone through the detail of even hiding the bandit sign attachments. Again, all of these things in the vein of EPV and making sure everything looks really, quite perfect in the downtown area. Okay. Parking lot IDs. Pedestrian directionals, and pedestrian maps. Which brings us to the project costs. Browning was going to discuss that a little further.
So we asked Hunt to come up with a phasing plan if we were to phase it, as well as a total cost estimate to implement the plan. So if we were to go with phasing it, phase one, we could do the pedestrian directional signs with the leftover money from the money that the council appropriated, where we can do the pedestrian signs with a smaller contingency of 6% instead of 10%. But we only could do that if we were to go with the standard poles and not go with a decorative pole. If we were to go with a decorative pole, we would need an additional $66,000. We do have money in the capital program for the downtown parking system, where we can install the directional sign as well as the parking lot identification signs in the downtown parking system, whether we go with the decorative or standard poles. This gives an idea of the total cost for the program. If the council wanted to hold off and consider appropriating money with the next budget cycle or a future date, then we could hold over the leftover money, the $143,000, and then council could appropriate the additional money, and that we would need $464,000 and change using the standard pole, or $714 additional dollars for the decorative pole. If we were to go with a phasing plan versus doing all at once, phasing phase two with the vehicle signs, again with the standard pole, $371 and change, decorative post, $474,000. That would have to be appropriated at future time by council to do that. And discussing the vehicle signs and talking to Hunt, the recommendation is, because it's hard to divide the city up, okay, which vehicle signs have we put, because they're leading people to a point. It's probably best to do all the vehicle signs at once, and not like maybe starting the waterfront and you get them partway there, or you start only in the downtown and, hey, where do these signs come from? So they did a really good job of identifying the locations for the vehicle signs. So the recommendation is to do all the vehicle signs at one time. Phase three could be the pedestrian maps. Again, different costs, $71,500 if you go with the standard poles, $104,000 if we go with the decorative poles. One thing that we are looking at is working closely with the MTD. They have some maps on the shuttle stops, and possibly swapping out the shuttle maps with the pedestrian map, and then put the shuttle route and the shuttle stop locations on that map. So we would not have as many signposts that we have to install. So take advantage of reducing and not adding more signage and post. And then the waterfront parking sign, something the waterfront department can do at the phase 4. If they want to do them earlier, they could appropriate money at the appropriate time. And we're happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Yeah, I've got sort of a heretical question here. Was it the city's recommendation or your recommendation to have these 3 different colors in different parts of the city that we see here?
I don't know if I want to take credit for it, but I think it was something that came about in our ad hoc subcommittee meetings, that the EPV is certainly a recognized district and is worthy of feeling a little bit different. Likewise, I haven't discussed this, but Browning touched on it, is that in the EPV we would have a decorative base and a decorative post. So I think that was what started the discussion point. Likewise, I think the waterfront is really quite different than citywide, as is different from the EPV. So I think what we wanted to do was come up with a cohesive system that, regardless of the color of the sign, it worked together as one. Right. But still recognize the differences between those different areas.
So and this is just, an amateur's observation here, but it seems to me 3 different signs sort of lend themselves to the clutter criticism, only in the sense that if they were all the same color, visitors and ourselves would realize, okay, that's a city sign. So I just like folks to consider maybe it would be better if all were the same, in this case, the brown. I wouldn't reflect immediately, oh, this is EPV, therefore that's why it's brown.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if it might be more unifying for the city to have them all with the same background. And I'd like to know what others think of that. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was trying to get to the bottom of the decorative versus standard pole dialogue. And
Okay.
I'm looking at like pages 25, 6, and 7, in the lower right, that those poles, for example, is that the decorative pole? And then where's the standard pole? I mean, and again, talk to us a little bit
Okay.
more about, I didn't see anything that went, this is the decorative and this is the standard and this is where we would invest $150,000 extra.
Okay, we need to work directly with sign committee on the final selection of the decorative base as well as the finial that would be at the top of the post. But for the EPV area, yes, on page 25 in the lower right-hand corner, that does represent an example of a standard pole. If you look on that same page where it says public parking lot 3, it's an example where when you're not in the EPV, a standard post is just literally a painted Malaga green post that's just the post itself. There's no decorative base, not necessarily a decorative finial at the top. So the difference is just cost.
Hopefully appearance, too.
And appearance.
Yeah. Okay.
It certainly would be nice to have the decorative posts.
I hear you. And you also mentioned, and I remember from our streetlight conversation of a few years ago, where we picked out designs were discussed. The EPV has the decorative that's light standard that's gone for since the get-go. But so is there any discussion about doing the decorative pole in EPV and doing it straight elsewhere? I mean, that's kind of what we're doing
Yes.
with the street lights. And I mean, if I missed something in my review, then maybe you can fill it in.
We have discussed that. So in the EPV area, which is the brown sign family, we would have decorative posts according to the discussions throughout the project. The reason why we've priced it both ways is sheerly cost and the fact that it costs a lot to do a decorative post. So the decorative post would only be in the EPV area, and that everywhere else we're maintaining a standard post.
And those decorative posts, would they have the same issues as the street lights where they are higher maintenance as well?
Potentially, they would have that issue, but they'll be painted the Malaga green. I think the major issue is going to be the base, especially if you have the cap or the plate they want around the base, there could be some maintenance issues, and they're going to have to be painted probably in 10 years, so that's something the staff's going to have to budget for in the future.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Hart?
I don't think we have anybody here from Landmarks or Sign Committee to speak to this. And I'm kind of surprised because this is generally a big deal, signage in downtown. And did you say what happened at Sign Committee when you made your presentation? Did I miss that?
We were at Sign Committee last Wednesday, and the Sign Committee unanimously, it was a joint committee of the HLC and ABR Sign Committee, and they supported moving forward the program. They did talk about the green background versus the blue background, and the chair of the Downtown Parking Committee did speak, and I believe he's here today to talk about the blue background. And there was some conversation, and because we would not be there. I guess the comment one of the members was seeing that we're not the only city in the nation that would be not going with blue. They were comfortable going with the green background. We didn't take a position from a staff standpoint either way. It's really left it up to the committee. But they did recommend going to council, adopting the program, and they asked that we come back to the committee to work out the final details on the post-its in the EPV.
Okay, so the impetus for the green is coming from the design review committees or from the consultant?
Design review committees.
Okay, and the consultants were agnostic, whatever the design review committees wanted?
We designed to green throughout the process, but we've tested blue, and so we've sort of done both and wanted to do the mock-ups ourselves to test it. There's no international requirement for a color.
Okay.
We think it's the icon and the P.
Got it. And then were there any dissenting views in the design review committees about the quality or the fonts or anything at all? Is this really a consensus? I think amazed.
We've had a full support of HLC, ABR, and our ad hoc subcommittee, as well as sign committee. And I think that that we've done really every request that people have made. To work on letter spacing, to change the actual shape of the font to match the OG. We've worked very closely with our subcommittee members to make sure that we've built consensus, and we really feel we have. And we've made a lot of changes along the way, but we kind of worked quickly on it. The quadrifoil design that's on the back of the signs was also one of the points of discussion at one of our meetings, and we've changed that design to match what they requested as well.
A couple other things that came up at the HLC was they call this the OG, so we work closely with one of the members to adjust the shape here, as well as the size of the pedestrian sign. They asked if the pedestrian sign could be made a little bit smaller, so Hunt was able to do that as well. So, they didn't make any of the requests a requirement, or they come back and say, hey, can you take a look at these and make adjustments where you could. And on the Santa Barbara, they asked if we could make the Santa Barbara a little bit longer in this area, rather. It was more in this area here. So we made it a little bit longer. They did ask about the lowercase n versus the uppercase n. We explored both. And when we went to the sign committee, they said, hey, what's in the street currently in downtown Santa Barbara, the brass plaques, this is the lettering, stick with that lettering. So we did have the conversation. We responded to it, and we were ready to answer any questions at the sign committee, and they supported what we came back with.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to mention one last request from sign committee. Upon the discussion of the green versus the blue, I think what our recommendation is that the P in the circle is really what's internationally recognized, and that it needs to be of high contrast is what we wanted to do. So what the sign committee had suggested is in an effort, they had supported the green. However, they asked us to make the circle from 16 inches to 18 inches. So we've since enlarged it, which is what you're looking at here, and we've reduced the scale of the public parking to 2 1/4 inches. So we did, in fact, make that last-minute change from last week.
And then on page 3 of your presentation, you had a whole bunch of signs that kind of spoke to the visual inconsistency in the community.
Right.
And I'm not clear what of those signs, if any, are going to go away in favor of this program.
Okay. In the upper left-hand corner, you have some destination directionals. Those would all come out. Music Academy would come out. For the most part, all of these messages have been lifted and either added to our sign type and combined to have less signs. Again, it's a little unfair. I hate to take pictures because you would never see these all at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
However, the idea is to come up with a cohesive set. And as you can see here, to your point earlier about color, these all work as well, and they're in different colors. So I think signs are going to come in different colors, but the idea that they're all the same scale, regardless of where they are, they're all the exact same size, all the typography is the same, makes one common voice for the city of Santa Barbara to speak to your drivers and pedestrians.
Okay. And then how many signs of this program are new as opposed to replacing or combining other signs?
Okay. We have a total of 293 signs in the program. Do you have that one other sheet? It's in your... No, the one with the chart. Just this chart? Okay. Let's see, we've jogged these numbers so many different ways. I'm going to figure out the right way of answering that. There's a
or
total,
you can just explain it to
okay,
without
there's
my
a
precise
total of
question.
293 signs. Where possible, we've taken out signage to combine messages. So in one location, you may find 3 signs. We've combined all of those messages onto a single panel. Where the most sign concentration is going into the EPV area because most of your historic landmark destinations are in the EPV area. Does that...
Well, I guess maybe something more qualitative. They're going to feel like there are more signs in EPV. They're going to feel like the signs are... or they're consolidated signs, fewer signs. I don't have any kind of scale, and I don't think there's anything in any of this material that we have that helps me answer that or understand that.
Okay. We have worked out every sign location as well as every sign message, so all of that work has been done. There will feel like there's more signs, certainly in the downtown area, because there are no pedestrian signs currently. So I think that is probably one of the biggest hits, I think, is you'll see a lot of pedestrian signage that is going to direct people. And currently, you really don't have anything to direct you or connect you from the waterfront to the downtown area.
And then when we get to the parking signs, for example, we're doing direct replacements. So where there's an existing parking sign, we're going to replace that with a new panel. So we're doing a lot of parking swaps. We're actually improving a lot of the parking connections to deal with the one-ways and to get back around into the lot. So we've revised locations as well. So that's one where it's really just a one-for-one.
And I guess just one more time to sort of beat a dead horse. So there's all those design review committees and everybody. No one is saying there's too many signs.
That's correct. No, nobody.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know that Santa Barbara prides itself on having signs that are nearly illegible and very, very small and hard to read. So as we move into this new enlightened era, what standards are used for visibility so that people, in terms of distance, speed? My criticism of the parking system, for example, has always been that unless you know exactly where the lots are, it's hard to find your way there by our signage. If you're not doing 15 miles an hour and have 20/20 vision, it may be an issue. What standards are you using that are common? I can't really translate. You've got the sizes here, but it doesn't mean anything to me in terms of what it looks like in real life.
Okay.
How do you determine what the size and the font and all that is?
Okay. Starting with the vehicular signs, we have MUTCD guidelines, which is Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and they have sort of a set of guidelines for the size of the type. In most cases, those are written by engineers, and they're used for traffic type of signs on freeways. So there are some places in there that allow for design within communities. Part of the photograph that you saw earlier where we tested the different sign types was how to test the size of the type on your street specifically. You have many one-way streets. You have slow traffic streets in many cases. Sorry, this is the one where with Derek's still here, where we tested at both ABR as well as our HLC meetings, where the full committee left, we all went outside and we tested them from 130 feet back and 80 feet, 70 feet, so that you would sort of replicate what it's like as a driver to come to a stop sign. So we did test the legibility and settled on 3.5-inch type, which felt right to everybody for the city of Santa Barbara.
But Derek Bailey did weigh in on the final size of the signs. We want to make sure he was comfortable with the type size that before we took it to the sign committee for their review and final approval. Last thing we want to do is put something in the city that was not visible for drivers. And we did have some latitude in terms of pedestrian scale signs and how big they were. And we have mock-ups of the parking signs as well as the map and the pit sign if the council wants to see them that we had showed to the advisory committees. The vehicle signs were way too big to try and bring back into the council chambers.
And then just to get back on to Mr. White's point of the decorative finial in the base, do we have? Did I miss that? What does that look like? Do we not have a? Do we have a design yet?
For the decorative base, we're starting with the approved light standard. So we're actually using that approved tear sheet to model our base after, to try to conform.
So then, how do we know it's $150,000 price tag? What's the?
We ran some budget numbers on what a decorative post would cost as opposed to a standard post. So those numbers are budget numbers and are probably fairly spot on. But it would be a painted decorative post versus a painted standard post.
And if we wanted just to put the standard post everywhere and see what we thought, and then we said let's decorate them up, can we do that, or do we have to start over?
You probably, we could do standard posts with a decorative finial at the top with a decorative ball, which was one of the options, and I think that was Craig's suggestion, I believe,
Right.
at sign committee.
There's possibility we could add the base. We'd have to take the sign off.
You'd have to
put the base
redo
over.
for a base, but you could just lob on a top if we wanted to in the
Right.
future.
And the sign committee asked us to put a top on all the sign posts, in the EPV. And I was just talking to Terry this morning, and maybe even outside the EPV, we just put some type of cap on it that would match the pole. But to put a base on after we put the sign up, that we'd have to touch every single one and pull the sign off.
Okay, no, that was okay. So it's not just a test and then add. It's
Only
a
way
test and
we could
redo
test
if you
a
want
few
to.
if council wanted.
Okay, Mr. Bailey.
Madam Mayor, excuse me. The decorative bases are actually identical to the bases that we use on our shorter traffic signal poles, and they are clamp-on, so it is something that can be added in the future. We do have the exact costs of those, and we've worked with Hunt Design. That's why you see the.
So we could put in a standard pole, put a cap on it, see what we think. If we want to spend another $150,000 to decorate, we can. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Hotchkiss?
Quick question, Mr. Casey. Do we have these funds set aside, or has it got to be something special?
Madam Mayor, council members, we'd have to consider funding as part of the capital improvement program to identify additional funds. We have some funds, as Mr. Allen said, left over since we saved money on the design contract to do an initial phase. But it'll be priority setting with council looking at the capital improvement program and possibly the parking fund for some of the parking-related signs.
Okay. If we could go back to the slide that had all the different signs on it, I just wanted to ask one or two questions if I could. There we go. So is this lower left, Scenic Drive, would that sign disappear?
The Scenic Drive signs will stay. We made the determination early that is kind of like a route sign, not to a different destination, whereas City Hall is a destination or El Presidio is a destination. So the Scenic Drive signs will stay intact.
How about the Amtrak sign?
The Amtrak sign, I believe, has to stay. However, we do have directionals to
train and bus.
To train and bus.
Okay. And we have a tsunami sign there. Does that?
Tsunami signs I cannot change.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'd love to design one day, but
And the coastal bicycle route sign, the one in the lower left corner, will also stay. Those signs will stay. Those are the regional sign, and we're not going to be changing those. And we can explore with Amtrak whether or not we can swap out a train sign for this sign because it does look kind of not good. But we can work with the Amtrak regional manager on that one.
Okay, Mr. Hart, and then let's go to public comment.
Did Landmarks have a strong opinion about the decorative signs versus the decorative posts versus the standard post?
Their preference was the decorative base with the cap, but they didn't make it absolutely. Again, they left it up to the sign committee to make that determination.
I think the one thing they did say is that we could have a straight pole rather than a fluted pole, which does save some cost, but that if we could do decorative bases and a decorative finial, that would be sufficient.
Okay. Not a deal breaker for him, though.
Correct.
Okay. And then discussion at the parking committee about financing this. That seems like, it's interesting that one of your initial values was to turn drivers into walkers and walkers into shoppers. Sounds to me like there's a nexus between using parking funds and, one-time parking for the pedestrian signage downtown.
Well, we haven't discussed paying for the pedestrian signs with the parking committee. We have money in the capital program that we can use to install the directional signs to the parking lots as well as the parking lot identification sign. In terms of improving the visibility of the parking lots in our downtown, that's been on the radar of the downtown parking committee. I think when Councilmember Rouse was the chair of the parking committee, and we've been talking about how can we improve that, how can we improve the signage, and this is going a long way to improve it. The P-arcing signs that you see out there, they probably were okay when we first installed them, but they've outlived their usefulness. So coming up with a new sign is something that we as staff support and the parking committee also supports, and we have identified funding where we can pay for those signs if council approves this, and we can move forward. Or actually, I won't be doing it, but staff will be moving forward with it before the end of the fiscal year.
So was there discussion at the parking committee about spending money on the parking signs?
No.
Okay, so all that's to be determined later.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the parking committee with an update of where we are with it and what this decision the council is and how we're going to pay for it. But
so the suggestions in the staff report are just staff suggestions.
Suggestion that we've identified funding that we think we could use for it.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we asked a lot of questions about this. Let's move on to to public comment, and we'll start with Maggie Campbell. And I know, Kate Schwab, you're giving your 2 minutes over to Ms. Campbell, so you have up to 4 minutes. And then Ed France will be next.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, good afternoon. I'm happy to report we have a tree on State Street today, so Christmas is around the corner. Thank you to Consumer Fire Products for bringing it to Santa Barbara. I am here today to share a resolution of support that our Executive Committee of our Board of Directors passed this morning, asking you to please approve this wayfinding signage program. It is long overdue. A lot of great work and thought has gone into it. We are totally endorsing it with one exception. We're asking for a modification to support the sign being blue for parking instead of the green. We think if there's a choice, a preference, we wanted to go on record, and I won't take your time to read this. I would ask that the resolution be read into the minutes and made part of the public comment, but we'd rather err on the side of being more familiar, particularly to our international visitors, and if we're going to split hairs over a color, we prefer the blue. We think parking is a function of business, and we're here representing the collective businesses and stakeholders downtown to ask you to approve this with that one modification. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed France will be followed by Ken Oplinger.
Madam Mayor, members of council, in the words of Michiganders everywhere, go blue. In terms of parking, it's been mentioned that the parking signage, that it's not uniform everywhere. However, just because there are exceptions doesn't mean that there's not a standard. It is a generally understood standard that parking signs are blue. The contrast is better. This is a very important program, and the process, understandably, has skewed heavily under aesthetic considerations, but the content matters. And in this case, getting people to downtown parking garages, it will function better if it's blue. It's a great program. I hope you support it. I would have loved if earlier in the process we'd have had more information, like a draft report earlier, but I think that the staff and the consultants have done excellent work, and I hope to see these go up with some blue signs. Thank you.
Ken Oplinger will be followed by Matt Labrie.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ken Oplinger. I'm here representing both the chamber today as well as Kathy Jagged-Ikes and Visit Santa Barbara. From both groups, we want you to know that we're very supportive of the proposal that's been brought to you. However, we also believe that the parking sign should be blue. And let me respond directly to the proposal that was made to you. While we certainly agree that there is no international requirement, there are certainly international standards. And when it comes to colors, green signs are for directional, blue signs are for motorist services. Parking is a motorist service. That is the standard that is used in most places. That is what I'm familiar with. I'm sure you're familiar with. And frankly, when it comes to being able to see them from a car, it's easier, especially in the city with all of the green that we have here, to have a blue that will stand out and make it easier for motorists to find those. So on behalf of both of our organizations, we ask that you move this forward unanimously with that change. Thank you.
Matt Labrie, and then Trey Pinier, and then Peter Marin will be the final public comment speaker.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Matt Labrie, and though I serve on your downtown parking committee and also on the downtown organization, I wanted to share a couple of my own thoughts, as those organizations have already given you a formal opinion. I hope that you support the wayfinding project as well. The design work that both staff and the consultant have done have been very good, with the modification to the background color for the parking P. Anecdotally, I just want to point out that the consultant has said several times that there's been a real effort to combine multiple messages onto one sign. And really the only place in our downtown that we have handicap parking is in our public parking lots. And so this is, I think, a wonderful byproduct of using a blue background behind the P to differentiate it from the on-street parking. I think is excellent. Get those parkers that need handicap parking into our garages and lots. There's lots of other reasons I think the blue background is the better choice, many of which I've detailed in a letter that Councilmember White, I'm sorry, I realized that it bounced back from you, but hopefully you've had a chance to digest that. I'd be happy to speak more to that, but I'm going to leave you to your discussion. Thank you very much for your time.
Trey Pinner.
Madam Mayor, member of the council, good afternoon. My name is Trey Pinner. I'm also the vice chair of the Downtown Parking Committee, also here speaking on my own behalf. As you can tell, some of us here are passionate about our blue color for our parking symbol, and we have discussed it quite at length at the last two meetings of the Downtown Parking Committee, and feel strong about the idea of identifying the parking as easy as possible. One of the benefits of our parking garages is they've been well designed to be not look like parking garages. They're sometimes hard to find. They look like buildings. And that's a testament to the architects and the city and the Landmarks Commission and HLC to make them look so. But on the other hand, we need to find the parking spaces for people to use the parking garages. Although I think both signs and the wayfinding system is a tremendous benefit to the city and will be a benefit to the city, we do believe that the blue background on the P just is a little bit more recognizable and more customary for folks. I think they're both very visible, but I think they will be a greater benefit for our out-of-town parkers to find the space. Most people who live in Santa Barbara, who've been here for a while, they do know where the garages are. So really we're trying to focus on the people who are visiting to find their way around the town and make the traffic flow a little bit easier. I was talking to an architect about this, and he mentioned to me, what do our sister cities use? Well, our sister city in Ireland uses the blue P, and other sister cities of ours use that same color. So if that's a reason, consider it. Thank you.
Peter Marin.
My wife has asked me to say she wants all the signs one color, and she asked, wouldn't people be confused if handicap stickers are blue and these others are blue, and people will not quite be sure where they can park and not. However, I wanted to say that if it was at all possible for you to have rearranged these agenda items, you should have, Some of us value our time just as much as you value yours. You have grown-ups and serious people sitting here for an hour and 20 minutes listening to a discussion of what color signs should be when we have other things to do. And I would hope in the future, when you schedule items on your agenda, you pay attention to what your visitors will want to discuss and what they don't want to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes public comment. To the council, Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start by saying that I feel completely incompetent to decide between blue and green for parking backgrounds. And I was wondering, a question for staff, did this question come up in a detailed way when it was being reviewed by the sign committee and ABR or HLC?
We've talked about the background color for the parking identification at length. It started with the ad hoc subcommittee early on at our first meeting. They initially wanted us to go with just the white P on the brown, and because they wanted the signs to kind of blend in the background, and we kind of pushed back. Well, anyway, we're trying to solve that problem. And then Hunt, they explored all different types of colors, and they selected green, working with the ad hoc subcommittee, because green is what we have in our downtown, but they went with a different shade of green. And Jen can speak to that a little bit more of how they came up with the green, if you like.
Would there be any point, have all the blue proponents spoken in front of this committee? I mean, what I'm trying to get here is this kind of a late hit, or has this been a steady discussion?
We talked about blue versus green at the first or second ad hoc subcommittee. I mentioned blue versus green. We talked about this at the downtown parking committee in September, when I presented the program to them, give them an update what's going on, because we're going to start working through the review process. And then we mentioned at the Historic Landmarks Commission, the Architecture Board of Review, and then I took it to the Downtown Parking Committee a second time in this month to give them an update and where we are, that we had presented it. And each time the Downtown Parking Committee strongly supported having the blue background versus the green background, because they felt it was more visible in directing the visitors to our parking lots. And then that was presented to the sign committee, and Hunt put together a mock-up. We even took some pictures that you saw that were taken out in the field to show how the blue background versus the green background would show up. And you have those. I think we have the mock-ups here if council wants to see them. But we did spend a lot of time taking a look at it. We also emailed the ad hoc subcommittee after the downtown parking committee to let them know parking committee still feels strongly about having the blue background versus the green background. And they all said, we hear what you're saying, but we think green is appropriate for Santa Barbara. Yes, we have had a lot of conversation about it.
Okay, good, thank you. So on the larger question here, my understanding is that we have, from the money we appropriated, we still have 140-something thousand.
Correct, $143,000 left over.
Which is just about what we're talking about here for phase one of this program.
That's correct.
And that's with the non-ornamental posts. My observation from having been in this town for a long time is simple and clean, well-maintained is more important than ornamental. And I like the idea of saving money. So I would recommend that we go with the non-ornamental signs and see if we can live with them. If we can't stand them, then we could change them. But I think the most important thing about signs and signposts is making sure that they're clean, they're painted from time to time, they're not covered with graffiti. Those are the things that people really notice. I don't think they really notice the ornaments. So that would be my recommendation, and I'd be happy to make a motion sometime to that effect. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, since the beginning of when we started to build the structures downtown, signage has always been an issue. Remember we did the Big P, Little Arcing, and a lot of things that were designed specifically to confuse as many people as possible, including the Lot 6 sign, where we had that large green P, which people weren't sure if that meant there was a public restroom there or that was actually a parking structure. So I've always advocated for and always wanted to have the international sign, because we are an international destination city. Signs are to communicate information. As much as we try to hide them behind decorations and certainly behind foliage as time goes on, they're supposed to communicate. And I think they communicate more clearly when they're done in a way that most people around the world understand. People that live here can find the parking lots. Mr. Penner spoke to that. It's the people we're trying to bring in and to share our city with that we need to communicate with. So I would definitely go with the simpler poles to try to save a couple of bucks there, and go with the blue signage that means that to more people than our personal green sign does us. I'm not really sure why that decision went that direction. I know those little green signs we have in the bushes now are not visible in many, many lots. We've done sign surveys. So I would encourage us to try to communicate with the rest of the world. As much as we try to hide crosswalks, for example, with very subtle brick colors as opposed to white stripes, which mean crosswalks everywhere. Let's do this with the parking. Let's communicate to as many people as possible, as simply as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
I agree about the blue sign. I'm concerned about the total cost of the whole package. I think it's going to be a real tough sell when we get to the vehicular wayfinding signs to make that case within the capital improvement budget. But I understand the money that you have allocated. That makes sense. I understand the parking committee funds. That makes sense. The waterfront funds works for me too. I think you can make a case that the downtown parking fund should pay for the pedestrian map signs under the guise that I said before about turning drivers into shoppers. But I do think that the vehicular wayfinding signs, those are going to be in direct competition with road maintenance. You're talking about almost $400,000. That is a different subject to me.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we also being asked to decide about paying for it all at once or phasing it in? You're recommending phase?
I'm recommending phase just because of the dollar amount. If in the perfect world, it'd be great to do all of it at once. We could have the benefit of Hunt being on board to help oversee and work with staff with the shop drawings and making sure everything is put in the right place and we have good quality. But it's a big number. When I saw the number, I wasn't surprised. I think when we went to council and you appropriated money, we thought it was going to cost about $750,000 to do a citywide directional sign program. And yeah, it's costing about that money, not much money. So I'm recommending going with the phased approach. Council can come back during the budget process, and if you want to appropriate the money for the vehicle signs, or an option you might have is appropriate part of the money, and then we collect the money over a couple of years, so it's not a big hit at once. But that's something that you're going to have to work through when you do the budget cycle. But I do recommend that we move forward at least with the pedestrian signs as well as the downtown parking signs. And we can talk to the parking committee at their next meeting about the maps. I can see where you're coming from. We can get their feedback on how they feel about the maps as well. But I think that the maps are a key, but we don't think it's critical. They could wait till the end.
Okay. And I'm persuaded to go with blue over green for the parking. And because no one is advocating for the decorative posts, I would go for the simplified ones then. Thank you.
Mr. Dwight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with my colleagues that we go with blue, we go with simple, and we go with at least the initially budgeted money to get the thing off the ground, and then we'll be coming back at the next budget cycle to see what more we're doing. I appreciate Mr. Allen's suggestion to slice it into a couple of pieces, perhaps, is one approach. Let's just see how we're doing at that point, but let's keep this thing going. It was a commitment made out of the, as I recall, didn't this come out of the RDA going away? And basically, this was we were trying to allocate the scarce resources around for different activities, and this was a high priority to the downtown organization and to the chamber. And so that's, and we're investing in our tourism, and this is a step in that direction. So, but let's take it. It sounds like we've got a pretty good consensus on an approach here.
Okay, I agree with my colleagues. Mr. Francisco, did you want to make a motion?
I wanted to make a motion. I move that we allocate the remaining funding to implementing phase one of this program. And though I am agnostic on it, it sounds like the majority of my colors are blue fans, so that will be part of the motion as well. And I also want to congratulate the staff and our design review boards and the consultants on coming up with a consistent plan. I know that this has been under discussion for a long time, and it's nice to be moving forward on it.
And the motion includes the standard poll and not the decorative?
Standard poll, yes, very important.
Okay, moved by Francisco, seconded by Hotchkiss. So we're going blue, we're staying simple, and we're doing phase one. That's the motion. Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. All right. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here when that clock says 5:04.
And so I'm nation to give my heart away. Here we are. Is our
Get back
romance
to our seats. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Thank you. If we can read item number 14.
Request from Councilmembers Rouse and Francisco regarding recreational vehicle restrictions.
Okay, this is an item that is brought by two different council members, and so we're going to have them, if they wish, give any opening remarks. I have a number of speaker slips already here for public comment, so after council questions, after the two council members here, if they have any opening remarks, and I don't know if they have a presentation here or not, after questions, they'll go to public comment. If you haven't submitted your speaker slip, please do so now. As when public comment starts, then I'm going to give it 2 minutes and then cut off the rest of public new speaker slips. So you're all here now. If you want to speak, put in a speaker slip. Okay, so Mr. Francisco, Mr. Rouse, whoever wants to go first.
I yield to Councilmember Rouse on this one.
Okay,
I think
Mr.
it's pretty
Rouse.
simple.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item is being brought forth in response to a lot of requests from neighbors and residential areas as well as commercial areas. We're trying to kind of wrestle down some of our RV parking restrictions and some of the misunderstandings that are about them. This is simply a matter of trying to provide a little bit more latitude for our public works director and our police chief to determine what areas may be eligible for posting. We have one of the least restrictive RV parking regulations in the entire state, especially in the coastal areas. And so I think so that everybody understands what we're trying to do and that we can respond to neighborhoods. And then we can also respond to traffic and safety issues. And gladly see Mr. Bailey and Mr. Allen here so we can ask you questions as we come upon these different issues as we go forward. Because there are traffic and safety issues with certain roads are not appropriate in terms of the width to accommodate RV parking, especially if they're parked on both sides of the road. As a matter of fact, that's what I went through this morning trying to go down my street. So, in any case, that's really all it is, Madam Mayor. It's just this one item. We have the following land uses are what are under the authority to do that, and we're just trying to expand that so that under the authority of the Public Works Director and the Police Chief, they can have some discretionary latitude to post streets that have special problems, whether it be parking and safety issues or certainly neighborhood issues. Thank you.
Mr. Francisco, do you have anything? Nope. Okay. That's it? Okay. Well, any questions or comments? Not comments at this point, but any questions by council? Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask our council about this, how that presumably you've looked at this and opined that this strategy is a valid strategy for going forward.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, in last spring when the council removed restrictions on temporary RVs following case law out of Los Angeles that said that the definition of temporary RV was so vague that a car with a sleeping bag in the back could be an RV. I provided research on the background of the RV parking rules. The long story short is that the Court of Appeal has upheld Santa Barbara's ability to post areas for no RV parking. The council in 2008 added restrictions to its own power to post no RV parking signs, And it did that by identifying what, for lack of a better phrase, I call sensitive land uses. Schools, parks, daycare centers were identified as areas around which the council did not want RV parking. So you limited the discretion of the police chief and public works director by not allowing them to post no RV parking except in those areas near sensitive land uses.
Madam Mayor, how much of our downtown, shall we say, or anyway, to just weigh in how, giving us a perspective, how much of our city is off limits to RV parking? 1%, 5%, 10%, et cetera.
It's probably
To
in
staff,
the
please.
5% range, 5-10% max. I looked at the map a number of years ago, and when you look at the map, it's not a lot of the city. There's quite a few part of the city that we have not put no RV parking signs on, primarily because they don't meet the definition as defined in the ordinance.
5% of our city is off limits to RV parking
Roughly
at
5%.
this point.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Hart?
So what do the neighboring jurisdictions do in the county and Goleta and around the city? What are the regulations for RVs in those places?
I believe the city of Goleta, they have no RV parking citywide. Carpinteria, there's no restrictions in Carpinteria, and I don't believe there's a county ordinance that deals with RV parking.
Thank you.
Isn't Goleta no RV parking during the daytime hours?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, I believe Goleta's restriction is actually on oversized vehicles, so it's not RV specific, but most RVs would fall into the category of the size definitions that Goleta has set. I believe the only restriction in the county it's actually not implemented yet, but I believe Isla Vista is going to have some sort of restriction in the near future.
And then I guess just one more question for city attorney. So there is no court cases pending. There is no legal restriction on our ability to restrict RV parking.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, there is a court case pending. We call it Homes on Wheels 2. The Homes on Wheels group and a few individual plaintiffs sued the city last year. The case was ultimately dismissed by the trial court. That's up on appeal. Okay. That case focuses more on the impact of the city's policies on disabled people who might travel in RVs. But there's nothing that directly restricts your ability.
And then what is the status of the city's sanctuary parking process with off-site parking lots and RVs?
You're talking about the Safe RV Parking Program that's managed by the New Beginnings Program, and Downtown Parking oversees that program. They currently have 25 RVs in their program. 2 of our city downtown lots are in that program, the Carrillo Commuter Lot and the Coda Lot. We have 10 RVs that are parking in the, in the Coda Lot, 9 are in the Carrillo Lot, and there's space for 1 more in the Carrillo Lot. Total wide, they have a total of 95 vehicles, not necessarily RVs. Not all the lots they have identified in the program that have joined the program are suitable for RVs to be in the program. So if they can't accommodate an RV because of space size, they can't be in there. But so totally, right now they have a total of 25 RVs, and there is a representative here from New Beginnings that can answer specific questions if you have those. But
okay, well, I guess Mr. Linkert probably has a speaker slip in. No, he does not. Then, would you mind coming up and answering some questions?
Or we have Amanda here who,
excuse
who runs
me, Amanda,
the program.
go ahead. I'm behind the curve.
Do you want to
there.
come on up?
Yeah,
We
Amanda,
have some
would you mind
questions
coming
from Mr. Hart. If you can introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, my name is Amanda Staples, and I am the program coordinator for the New Beginnings Counseling Center Safe Parking Program.
And I just wanted to get kind of a read from you as to the demand versus supply, limitations on the program. What are you experiencing in terms of the ability to provide our safe RV spots for folks?
Okay, so you're talking specifically RVs?
Yes, that's what we're talking about today.
Okay, great. So our lots have the ability to determine what types of vehicles they can accept, how many they can accept, and what times clients can start entering and leaving. Right now, as Browning had mentioned, we actually have 2 city lots that participate in that. We're contracted to 10 spaces each. I mean, RVs range from 18 feet all the way, 33 and plus. So sometimes it's hard to accommodate vehicles that are very large if we already have 9 others in a lot. We always have the opportunity to expand. We do have lot monitors that check when clients are entering and leaving. And we have the ability to add more spaces, but so far our efforts have not found any other lots that would like to participate at this time.
So you have the ability to expand the program, but you don't have spaces available to do that.
The program only operates overnight. So the daytime parking is, we don't supply that at all.
I think it's you're looking for new locations for parking, not added parking spaces in the same locations.
Correct.
Because you don't have sufficient parking spaces to accommodate additional demand right now without new locations.
Specifically for RVs.
Okay, thank you.
And to follow up, our city ordinance allows the safe parking program. Originally, it was in 3 different lots. It was the Coda and Carrillo commuter lots, and then there was also what was known as the Pony Lot or the Garden Street. And as I remember, when that ordinance was put together, the compromise was that's for a place if there were families who needed safe overnight parking. Is that in force, or is that not happening today?
That was correct. That lot was originally identified for families only, and about 3 years ago, we were having problems with non-program participants being in that lot, and that's under the Waterfront Department's purview, and the Harbor Patrol was spending quite a bit of time in there enforcing it. So there was a request by the Waterfront Director to remove that lot from the program. So we did that, and we expanded the spaces available in the Coda and the Carrillo lot.
So the net number of spaces in city lots stayed the same? They just went from 3 lots to 2 lots?
Correct.
And did that come to council?
I think I can't remember if we did or not. That was
okay, because I think the ordinance the council actually voted on the 3 lots. So, that's a whole other conversation. But so there are right now 10 spots in each of the 2 commuter lots. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they're currently all filled. And are they all filled with RVs?
Only RVs can be in the 2 commuter lots by the agreement we have at New Beginnings, and they must be registered vehicles, have insurance, and self-contained, and to be in the program.
And if we wanted, I guess, Mr. Klon, a couple of questions for you. If we wanted to expand the number of slots per city lot, that would be an ordinance change?
Madam Mayor, no. The specific lots are not identified in an ordinance. I believe that was done with a resolution accompanying the ordinance back in 2008. But there's not to my knowledge, an
okay, because there was a big debate about which lots to use, and I remember the Garden Street lot being that big. It was a compromise of only families could be register for Garden Street. So, I mean, we can look at that again if we need to.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I believe when it was in the agreement that when we brought the agreement before council, we specified in the agreement with New Beginnings which lots and how many can be in the lots. It wasn't in the ordinance.
But it wasn't in the ordinance.
It was not in the ordinance.
Madam Mayor, I believe my notes are that it was Resolution 07-026 that authorized the New Beginnings program.
Okay. All right. So if we wanted to expand the number of spaces available, is that by ordinance or is that just part of a program?
We can just do that with an agreement with New Beginnings.
So what's to stop us if we wanted to double the number of spaces in the new 2 different commuter lots?
We'd have to look to see if we can accommodate additional spaces. I don't know if we could double it. We might be able to add a few more. I'd have to sit down with the downtown parking staff to do an inventory to see where we could possibly add more RVs in the lot and still make it available for the public. I know the Coda lot is a very popular lot downtown after hours for people who are using the downtown to shop or dine, so we would be encroaching on that, but definitely might have additional space in the Carrillo lot.
Okay, but so that's just a internal administrative staff level, not a council policy decision?
Right. The lawyer's answer to what's to stop you is nothing. It's a policy decision.
Okay. And then finally, so just to distinguish again, and this is institutional memory that you might have to correct me if I am remembering incorrectly. As I understand it, what the city of Goleta their ordinance is what the city of Santa Barbara originally had and was challenged in terms of having signage at the openings of each of the entrances to the city. That was challenged by Homes on Wheels. Judge DeBelfe said that is not sufficient enough to give notice to people in RVs. So if you want to restrict RV parking in any parts of the city, you need to put signage up in any block face at that site. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. That's what I understand.
Okay, sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so and is Goleta, just to be clear, is that just daytime restrictions or is it 24 hours?
I believe the Goleta restrictions are 24 hours.
24 hours. Okay, and it's oversized vehicles, not necessarily RVs. Okay, okay, and so where we are today with that litigation is an agreement through the judgment that if we wanted to expand the number of block faces to restrict RVs, we have to put a sign up at that block.
Yes, Judge DeBelfe's order was confirmed by the Court of Appeal. So there's actually published case law that would be binding on Goleta as well as Santa Barbara that says that the city has the power to post no RV parking signs, but it must post signs on each block face if it wishes to enforce that law.
Okay. All right. Mr. Rouse and then Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a great discussion. I think that it's a worthy discussion, but that's not really what the point of my initiative was today. It was about RV parking in neighborhoods where it wasn't necessarily about camping. It could be about storage. It could be about traffic and safety issues. It could be about, I know that in Goleta, one of the initiatives was about the fact that a lot of people out there tended to have RVs, boats on trailers, and that's why they approached that parking issue in the first place. And it's kind of where I'm trying to go today. It's not about people and programs. It's about the vehicles themselves. And to that point, Mr. Bailey, you have some concerns about different parts of the city where RV parking may not be appropriate due to just the physical layout or the physical size of the passage. Could you elaborate on that for me a little bit, please?
Councilmember Rouse, I'm just going to move over and show you a few pictures so I can illustrate. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, currently in the ordinance, there's no provision for traffic safety specifically. So one of the things that we run into, and we don't have a tool to deal with it, are situations like this. As I go around the city, I take pictures of things. This is a photo on De La Vina Street. So this is an arterial in town, 2 lanes in each direction. On this particular day, there were 2 RVs parked directly one across from one another. With the width of our streets in the city, and just with the width that RVs are, there isn't a sufficient travel lane to move past RVs. Normally, we have 18 feet from the center line to the curb, and that fits really nicely with a minimal 10-foot traffic lane and an 8-foot space for parking. RVs generally take up a minimum of 8.5 feet. And when you get an MTBD bus going by where their operating space is 9.5 feet, that leaves zero margin for error. So that's one photo I took. Here's another. This is a little bit further up on De La Vina Street. There's only about 8 feet left over. This particular block on De La Vina Street next to the Louise Lowry Center is a little bit narrower yet. So just from a traffic safety perspective, there are certain areas of the city that we probably would address if we could. But right now, we just don't have the tools to do that.
And when you say, Mr. Bailey, as we try to go forth, we're trying to develop a bicycle master plan and trying to get circulation developed for that. And one of the intentions with this was to be able to have discretion to post areas like that if we wanted to implement a bike lane or implement at least bike sharing safety, it would be easier with an RV parking restriction. Is that a fair statement?
Councilmember Rouse, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And as people have asked about other kinds of capacity for visitors and and whatnot. We have in our city currently we have the Sunrise RV Park and the Tropical Garden RV Park that you can, and then of course in the campgrounds up and to the north and to the south of us that you can RV park. And most, excuse me.
I'm sorry. If you're going to keep interrupting, I'm going to ask you to leave. We want to hear what people have to say at their turn to say it. Thank you.
And as we have also the city, for the situation where we have the programmatic things, we have the city subsidize and some space provided for the New Beginnings program, which is a very well-run program, by the way. So that, and they'll also have the waterfront spaces that are available in the day, but not for overnight parking. So there are different capacities for RVs. Question is, what's appropriate in neighborhoods? What, as we have people go through whatever they go through to get their permits or to buy their houses, to remodel their houses, how do we restrict what sits in front of their house is not theirs? And once again, that came up in Goleta when they did the original RV parking restrictions, because a lot of people were storing their recreational vehicles and boats on the street, and that's why a lot of those ordinances came up in the first place. So that's what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for just a little bit of latitude and discretion as we go forward and try to develop traffic safety standards, to develop bike paths, and develop just a standard of understanding for where it's permissible and proper to park an RV.
Okay, we're going to, Mr. Francisco?
Mr. Kalund, going back to your answer to Mr. White, you said, I just want to understand this, you said that there was no restriction on where we could prohibit RV parking in the city, and 10.44.205, or whatever the number was, that was a self-imposed restriction. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to public comment. We have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Diane Duncan, to be followed by Chuck Flax.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Diane Barrickman Duncan. I'm a healthcare provider. I've been serving the city of Santa Barbara for 28 years, and my husband and I are also property owners on the Mesa area. I rise to speak in support of amending the portion of the city code on RV parking by adding other land deemed sensitive by the chief of police and the Public Works Director to the list of prohibited parking. This has been a big issue for my husband and I, not only on a personal home level, but on a business level, where I work as a physical therapist at the Human Performance Center. I spoke last year to the Parking Committee and the City Ordinance Committee, and I am grateful for some of the things that have been done as a result of my activism. This amendment will give our police department and the Public Works Department the additional leverage and authority to address safety issues and health issues that the current city code on RV parking does not provide. I have several personal stories, but I only have 2 minutes. I've already shared many of my stories with you, and I appreciate you listening. I hope and I urge the members of this committee to allow this amendment to be moved to the Ordinance Committee for consideration, and I urge passage of this. Thank you for your time.
Chuck Flax will be followed by Carl Wagner.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Chuck Flax, Executive Director of the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness. And we're not taking a position on this issue at all. In fact, the reasoning and rationale, the way it's been presented, doesn't seem that controversial. I think the concern is, to what extent do people who live in their RVs and it's their only home in Santa Barbara, where will they be able to park their RVs? And so I think the concern that we have at C3H is that there be enough available places for people to park who need them, both at night and during the day. We applaud the program at New Beginnings because it's not just a place to park, it's a place for people to get into permanent housing, which is our ultimate goal, is to end chronic homelessness in Santa Barbara. By the same token, because of the shortage of housing, because of the lack of opportunities that we have at our disposal for very low income and homeless people, we hope that you take that into consideration in approving this or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Wagner, and is Daniel Knapp here? Mr. Knapp? Yeah, oh, you're giving your 2 minutes? Okay, all right, so you have up to 4 minutes to be followed by Melody Baker.
Thank you, Your Honor. City Council. I brought here today an opinion. It's 89-602. Honorable Robert G. Beverly, member of the California Senate, requested for the Attorney General to weigh in on this. Does a California city have the authority to prohibit the parking of particular categories of vehicles, such as recreational vehicles or motor vehicles which exceed a specific length or width, or its residential streets during all or certain hours of the day? The conclusion: a California city has no authority to prohibit the parking of particular categories of vehicles on its residential streets during all or certain hours of the day, with the exception of commercial vehicles having a manufacturer's gross vehicle weight rating of 10,000 pounds or more. I'd like to clarify what this gentleman said. Right now, you currently have an ordinance in place that is unconstitutional. And it's only unconstitutional because most of us poor people don't have the means or the ability to fight it, to tell you that it's unconstitutional. And that's why you're getting away with it. That's the only reason why you're getting away with it. If we go on further, it says specifically, it is interesting to note that the concept of having local regulations affecting traffic applied to all vehicles and none finds expression at least as early as 1919. Subdivision D of Section 22 of the California Vehicle Code, which supersedes any city ordinance, as amended that year, provided local authorities shall have no power to enact, enforce, or maintain an ordinance, rule, or regulation in any way in conflict with, contrary to, or inconsistent with the provisions of this act, or of any section or other subdivision thereof. And no such ordinance, rule, or regulation of said local authorities, that would be you, shall have any force or effect, excepting, however, that such powers are now or may hereafter be vested in local authorities to enact ordinance or regulations applicable equally and generally to all vehicles and other users of highways, and providing for traffic or crossing officers or semaphores to bring about the orderly passage of vehicles and other users of public highways. (22.507) General authorization for local agencies to prohibit or restrict the parking of vehicles or certain streets or highways during all or certain hours of the day. Discretion to a city to designate certain streets or highways in certain hours of the day for parking restrictions to be imposed. It does not provide authority to prohibit or restrict the parking of certain types of vehicles. It's very clear. The California Vehicle Code supersedes any city code or ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Kahlon, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I rarely get into back and forth with the members of the public, but the Attorney General's opinion that Mr. Wagner referenced was specifically rejected by the Court of Appeal in the first Homes on Wheel case. So the court said the Attorney General's opinion is that of another lawyer, and it doesn't count. It's not correct. So that what you just heard is unfortunately, or not unfortunately necessarily, but is not the law. The city does have the authority to regulate.
Okay, thank you. Melody Baker will be followed by Peter Marin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. By the way, Miss Wright, is her name Wright or Price?
Pierce.
Miss Pierce, good luck on your new venture. First of all, I'm homeless. I do not have a motorhome or a trailer. That is a responsibility that is cost prohibitive. On my way to Path every day, going down that side street where the post office is, I would have to go out into the street because there's no sidewalks that are wheelchaired. I would almost get hit by traffic because of the RVs. And in the past week, there has been a bunch of trash dumped just beyond the entrance gate to the post office. And it's all along there, and it's been 4 RVs. So I look at it this way. First of all, I'm not going to be able to maneuver after today, but if you're going to have an RV, you got to obey the law. Okay? Trashing is not nice. Blocking and making it unsafe, not nice. Okay? So I'm all in support of this. Thank you. Although I do say do not punish the good with the bad.
Peter Marin will be followed by Catherine Marin. If she's going to give it to you. Yes? All right. You have up to 4 minutes, and then it'll be Phil Walker.
First of all, with all due respect, Mr. Rouse, the places you listed as places people could park are not where they can park. Sunrise Park is always jammed, and it costs somewhere between $35 and $70 a night to park there. So it's basically all the places you named are not available to RVs, which leads me to my central point. We're not here to argue that there are not sometimes problems with RVs, and there are not streets which are sometimes overburdened with RVs. The real issue is how to solve that problem. The fact is that the ordinance now on the books about churches, parks, etc., was misinterpreted by the police or badly interpreted. So they interpreted the phrase, which is an excessive number, to actually mean 1 or more, right? That is part of the basis for our lawsuit, which is about blue zones, but is about much more than that, too. So if you write an ordinance as vague as this one is, giving the unlimited powers to the police chief and other city administrators, there really is no limit to how they could use it. Theoretically, if they wanted, they could sign every street in the city as being off limits to parking. And so what you've done is you've taken a small problem and you've created this elephantine solution to it, which has no limits, which is hard to believe. If these kinds of ordinance come before the court or the Court of Appeals, as vague as they are, as unenforceable as they are, as subject to misinterpretation as they are, they will not stand up to scrutiny. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is, since we agree there's a problem, and since there's an issue about daytime parking and enough nighttime parking, we think there are other ways to solve this. I think Chuck Flax from 3TH at one point said he would be glad to host a discussion about this. I also think it should be raised with Rob Pearson at City Housing, because this is interim housing. This is emergency housing. At some point, it has to be recognized not as an invasion of outsiders, but the last resource of people who cannot afford city housing, partly because of city policies, partly because of unavoidable circumstances. But this is housing for your citizens. It's not anything else. And it has to be considered that way. So if you're going to say no streets here, no streets there, fine. But let's create an alternative. It's quite possible to ask the safe parking program in conjunction with city officials and some advocates and some RV dwellers, to come up a plan of several possible kinds. One would be to use church lots during the daytime, during the week, when they are not overburdened by churchgoers. Another would be to use county parking lots during the weekend when they're not used. I mean the office parking lots. There are ways around this. There are vacant lots where place could be parked. We could say, for instance, that in every park where RVs are now forbidden to park, that up to 3 could park in a designed and assigned area of the parking lot. We could do that, even just in the daytime, because there are park rangers around, because most of the RV dwellers are well behaved. More than that, through the safe parking program, we could, if we wanted, create a permit program where vehicles would sign up with the safe parking program, be given a permit that allowed them to park in a certain area or on a certain block. Moreover, all vehicles in the program would agree that if they got to a block and there was 1 RV on that side or 2 RVs on both sides, that they would look for another place to park.
Thank you.
All of this is quite, did I use up 4 minutes?
Yep, you had a
okay.
counter
Anyway,
right there.
It's quite soluble if you want to do it and if you want to try. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Walker will be followed by Robert Hanson. Is Phil Walker here? You left? Okay. Robert Hanson, Bob Hanson, are you here? You left? Here you are. You. There. All right. All right. Nancy McCready. Who's speaking? Nancy McCready or Bill? Yeah. Whoever. Who's. All right. So you're giving your 2 minutes to Nancy. Is that correct? All right. So you have up to 4 minutes. Okay.
I wanted to let you people know that I am one of the only people who have applied for a camping permit in the city of Santa Barbara for my RV and have gotten one. I still have that camping permit. It's got a beautiful city seal on it, and I have all the copies of the emails that were sent to us by the city saying, one, which I really like, is that the police will not touch you with this camping permit in your window. It was for 30 days. Okay. I have always believed, and I'm going to read some of this because I'm a bad public speaker. I have always believed that alternative housing, my RV, saved my life when I had to flee an abusive situation. I believe that RVs are valid shelter and home to those who want to escape living on the streets or any other reason for loss of housing. I believe that RVs are valid shelter for retirees who sell their homes and go gallivanting in new motorhomes to enjoy a portion of their lives. By criminalization of these folks, the city does themselves a disservice to the tourist industry and the tax dollars they are capable of spending in our community. I personally have prevailed above the laws that criminalize our lifestyle. I have fought in court, paid when my vehicle was towed just to keep a roof over my family's head. Working a low-end service job for 41 years in this community did not net me enough money to get out and into a conventional house. As each year passed, the rents grew above my ability to pay. I would hope that instead of criminalizing further, we will work together, forming a round table to really resolve the issue. And this time, since we've already had a task force, bring the RV people to the table. We have never done this. They have really good ideas about what they need and want, and it would help quell a lot of the problems. I am very proud to be part of the Safe Parking Program. As one who helped gear the program up, I'm very proud of it. It has grown and it has really done well. I feel we should extend this program into daytime use because therein lies the problem, the daytime use of RVs. A manual is being authored right now for the many cities who call wanting to know how to create their own. And it was interesting. I was invited by the Safe Parking Program to be one of the people they interviewed. And I really loved the way the author understood everybody and everything. So let us all work on fixing this instead of punishing those of us who cannot keep up with the Joneses. And then I have a question for you. What the heck sets the boundaries on sensitive areas? We are going to have to probably include this language into the appeals process. And so I'm just one of those people who like to solve problems democratically and not fascistly, because our representatives can say what is good for us. We're the ones who have to say what's good for us. In any situation, we have to include the people, the homeless, to come to the round table, because unless we do that, we don't understand each other. Thank you.
Jason Colbert will be followed by Paula Party. Is Mr. Colbert here? Did he leave? He left? Paula Party? Come on up. To be followed by Joan Jameson.
Hello, everybody. I've been homeless for 16 years, and I just recently got a motorhome day before my birthday. And I think it's really beautiful and awesome, because being outside for 16 years is very scary. And I'm really happy to have a house over my head now. And I don't have the income like everybody else does. I've recycled to make my money. And it took me about 1.5 years to save up this money to get this vehicle. And I support everybody here, that has RVs and everything. And I hope they come to a solution to figure this out, because I don't want to get mine towed. And another thing is that parking thing with the RV parking. I see them everywhere downtown now. There's like no parking nowhere. And if your tourists come, where are they going to park at? There would be no parking for them anywhere. How are you going to make your money then? Because then you're going to kick all your tourists out of here. Got to think of them too coming in. It's not just us. It's them too. All right, you have a good day.
Joan Jameson will be followed by John Jameson.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'd like to thank you, first of all, for agendizing this and getting started again on this issue. And I was pleased to learn that we really do have a lot of latitude as far as what can be done in this city for about the street parking and RVs. And first of all, I would like to say that RV parking, especially overnight, and using the place as an overnight accommodation, is unsafe, unsightly, and potentially unsanitary and unhealthy. It is something that definitely needs to be addressed, as it is prevalent in our neighborhoods, in our city. It's very interesting to find out that there is nothing that restricts the city legally from doing something about it. There are plenty of municipalities all across this country that have done something constructive and proactive about it. And I would like to say that of the plethora of things you address as a council, this is something that should be front and center to all of us. We live near downtown. We experience this all the time. It is something very important and very difficult for us to accept. So I urge you to continue this discussion and get some constructive solutions to it. Thank you.
John Jameson will be followed by Gary Linker.
Madam Mayor, council members, I think we live at the epicenter of Upper East RV parking. These are typically RVs that sit there for 3 days, move across the street, sit for another 3 days, move around the corner, sit for 3 days, and then they're back again. And our driveway backs out onto Garden Street, and coming out takes a certain amount of skill. But when you've got an RV sitting right by your driveway, it's sort of cross your fingers and hit the gas and hope for the best. So from a safety point of view, these vehicles are just too big to be sitting for extended periods on the street. From the health point of view, I can leave that to your imagination. So that's it.
Gary Linker will be followed by Fred Sweeney.
My name is Gary Linker. I'm the former director of the RV Safe Parking Project, and I'm sorry to see this issue come to the front that it has. I think we have to face the reality that we're heading for a wet winter. There's going to be more people in the streets. We need to find the solution to the problem. I'm concerned that in the entire discussion of creating this potentially new ordinance, there were two examples on De La Vina Street, I would ask how many accidents were caused by those two RVs sitting there. And it seems to me that if we're going to take an action to add more legislation, there should be a rationale for it. I don't know how many accidents were caused, but if it is a safety hazard truly, and there have been accidents, then action should be taken. But more importantly, moving along what the mayor was considering when this first issue came up, this seems to create an opportunity for us to really look at what it means to find places to get people off the street. And unfortunately, there are more and more people living now in vehicles, and so the RV Safe Parking Project is burdened with people who live in vehicles and people who live in RVs. And I know that the county has taken some steps. Maybe the city and the county can work together. I'd be willing to volunteer to head up a committee to look for increased inventory and supply. But I think absolutely, if we're going to restrict neighborhoods and we're going to restrict city blocks, that there should be a system where for every block that's being removed, 3 or 4 other spaces are opened up elsewhere so people have alternatives as to places to go. Thank you.
Fred Sweeney will be followed by Deborah Lynch.
Madam Mayor, Council, Fred Sweeney. I'm president of the Upper East Association. I'm here representing our board of directors. This is an issue that has come to our membership attention. This actually has precipitated more conversation than the discussion this last summer on vacation rentals. We've provided you with a methodology. We're trying to determine how many of our members really are affected or feel that they're affected by the recreational vehicle parking on the streets. So we developed a electronic questionnaire that goes out to the majority. In fact, almost all of our membership are electronically connected. And in the last 2 weeks, we've received indication of over 15 residents and 63 incidences of RV parking that are of concern to those particular residences. It seems to be concentrated in a 9-block area, as described in the documents I provided for you. I've also provided for you the electronic input that we received back. We actually have names attached to all of those. All I chose to remove the names, and then the incidences that are involved. So we too would like to see a solution. This does in fact affect a number of our residences. There is spillover from time to time all the way up to Constant Street, which is the edge of our designated neighborhood, all the way to the bottom of the Riviera. It is interesting to note that RV owners do like to park in a flat area rather than an inclined street, so that kind of makes sense. So it is something we're going to continue to monitor. We'll continue to receive input from our membership and give that information back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Sweeney, I have a question too, since you're speaking on behalf of the board. When you say RVs of concern and affected by RVs, what did the board mean by that?
Well, I think that there's several concerns. One, first of all, is safety, because we don't know who's in those RVs. When you buy into a neighborhood, you buy a home, you tend to start to know your neighbors and you kind of figure out who lives where. With the RVs appearing, and many of them seem to play the 72-hour game, because that's the current rule that's being enforced. You have to move your vehicle every 72 hours. They're concerned they don't know who's in the vehicle. There have been some incidences of trash, has been mentioned by others. There may be other health issues. There's certainly noise issues. And we do observe from time to time, and I get up early and walk my dog. In the summertime, we'll get a surfer who decides he's surfed enough and is going to camp out in his station wagon and sleep in the car overnight and then take off in the morning. We do observe that. And we do observe other visitors with RVs. But there seems to be a kind of a chronic group that can be identified. We kind of start to know who they are, you know by the make, the model, certainly by the license plate, et cetera. And they too do tend to make the rounds. So that's the concern that property owners have.
So just to go through this, these are actual license plates.
Yes.
I'm assuming it's the same owner who has them. So in terms of not knowing who they are, there are a number of people where you could know who they are.
Well, in theory, yes, we could. Okay. But obviously, going up and knocking on somebody's RV door may not be the best thing in the world.
I'm sorry, please. It's just...
So, at any rate, no, we don't know.
Okay, and then the other question I had about, 10 years ago or so, when street sweeping first started moving around the city, there was a big issue. The room was packed about not wanting signs at all
correct.
in the Upper East area because it was visual blight.
Right.
And we actually made a determination in our street sweeping program that as long as the street sweeper could sweep 80% of the streets, then okay, we don't need the signs. So now you're asking for signs all over
Right.
different parts of the Upper East. So can you help me out here?
Yeah, and I'm smiling because I know the argument. I'm smiling because I think that those folks that are concerned about RV, is the signage issue the solution? I don't know that is. I don't know that they know that is. Certainly, yes, discussion will come up if some recommendation comes back to sign every block, as the city attorney has indicated might be one of the criteria. So yes, that will come back. And yes, people are going to have to make some decisions. If you don't like the RV parking and you want it restricted, then folks, you may have to have signs. And so, that'll be part of that issue. But I think what the board is looking for is just continuing to provide you with information, and we'll kind of continue to monitor your progress as you move through this process.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question, Ms. Murillo? And then Mr.
Yes, I
Hotchkiss
did,
also.
Madam Mayor. Mr. Sweeney, so your data reflect a time frame of the last week or so?
Last little over 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've lived up there for many years, I think.
I've lived in the Upper East for 34 years, I think, something like that.
Is the problem increasing recently, or did it happen perhaps in conjunction with when we started signing on the waterfront and people moved up there?
It could have been. It seems to have surfaced since the summertime, and I don't know what's precipitating it. We've had more inquiries and more questions. So the board decided, well, look, before we stand up and make any statements in front of council, let's at least try to get a quantity or try to quantify what the issue is. So that was the effort to put this survey together to see if we could really understand, is it just a couple of people that are complaining, or is it a bunch of people complaining, and is it a bunch of RVs, or is it just a few RVs?
So last year you didn't have issues.
We've had it from over the years from time to time, but we tend to kind of tell folks, look, be a little patient. People are having issues, whatever, they'll get by and people move on. I think most folks are kind of understanding we have a housing crisis. We have folks that can't afford to live in the homes we live in, et cetera. So I think people understand that. I think the other important thing that we begin to realize as we've gone to these district areas now that we're going to be dealing with is whatever solution you came up with, we don't want to take the issue that we perceive as our problem and give it to some other neighborhood. That's not going to be fair. So I don't know what the answer is, but that's the information we're providing.
Thank you. And how often does it happen, the situation that Councilmember Rouse was describing, where someone has a boat, or it's not someone's home, it's a recreational vehicle?
It's a storage. We do have some of that.
That's kind of hanging out on the street.
We do have some of that, and we do get complaints. I get emails from time to time on that issue, and we kind of talk it through. But there is some of that, yes.
But usually your homes have driveways and a place for...
Yeah, typically the Upper East, at least from a certain street on up, the homes are larger. They usually have larger driveways, and they have a place to park. A little lower as we get towards Sola, which is our boundary on the south. Yeah, that tends to occur.
Thank you.
Great. And Mr. Hotchkiss?
Do you have any idea what these folks are doing? Are they just sitting there all day long?
We sometimes we don't know. Sometimes, and the ones that I've personally observed, they tend to be there during the evening. Sometimes they're gone. There is a certain group that I observe, at least in my few blocks around where I walk my dog, is they'll be there for the 72-hour period, and then the next time I see them, they're parked up on Delavina by Trader Joe's or somewhere else for a while, and then they come back. So I don't know whether, I'm assuming these are working folks, and this is where they have to live. We just don't know.
So you think during the day they have a car they're taking and just parking it there?
There are a couple we've observed with the same car parks behind them all the time. So I'm assuming they own that car or have some association with that automobile.
Okay, no feel that these are people from, traveling around the country?
No, typically, at least in our neighborhood, typically we do see those from time to time, but they're usually RVs that are, say, of a current late model that are pretty spiffy looking and, have a nice tow thing behind them with a small car. We do see those from time to time. But no, the folks we see now are, they're pretty marginal in terms of the vehicle they're living in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Deborah
you.
Lynch will be followed by Martin Lynch. Okay, so Ms. Lynch, you have up to 4 minutes, and then Craig Zimmerman will be after Ms. Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. And I, too, would like to thank you for taking up this issue. The part of the Upper East that I happen to live in is in between the Alameda Park and Roosevelt School. And we've noticed a real kind of congestion of RVs that are camping, particularly in our neighborhood. It's, if you look up and down the street, there's almost always 2 or 3 on the street. Even if it's just one every block, you just look, the sight line is pretty significant. I have had like huge luxury campers that are these Class A campers that are $500,000 campers that are the size of a tour bus parked next to my house, and I've had less majestic campers parked next to my house. My house, because it's old, is 15 feet from the street, and so I have somebody camping in my side yard that's right next to my porch. I sent you all a letter, and I hope you had a chance to read it along with pictures, because I think the pictures are telling. To me, because I spent many years in profound poverty, it's not a matter of homelessness. It's a matter of the fact that I live in a residential neighborhood that I work very hard to keep nice. I'm the graffiti removal person and so on and so forth. And it's becoming a de facto campground. And I just think that to kind of pivot this back to the real intent of this ordinance amendment that's being proposed, it's to give a little more latitude to look at a street like mine that's being heavily impacted and that has a little more profound impact on its residents than is currently allowed by the restrictions that you all placed on each other. It's very heartening to me to hear that we're the most generous city in California on this issue. I also would like to note that I did look into what was going on after Desert Rain versus Los Angeles, which was the Ninth Circuit case that made them go back to the drawing board, and they have had an opinion from their city attorney, and it's bubbling up through their city council. City council asked them to look into this on just a straightforward banning of lodging in a vehicle on a street in the city between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., and the opinion is that that would sustain Ninth Circuit scrutiny. There was a second proposal presented that is a little more novel and fairly similar to ours, where it strives to meet the city council there's efforts to protect neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, in a manner that's sensitive to the needs of the homeless. And I won't take up your time with the details of that, because that's not the topic in front of us today. What's in front of us today is to simply give a little more latitude so that there can be some enforcement in necessary and specified situations like that's occurring in our neighborhood. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Craig Zimmerman, thank you. Craig Zimmerman will be followed by Wander Levinoy.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider, council members. My name is Craig Zimmerman. I live in the area referred to as the Upper East. I strongly support the proposed ordinance amendment. By way of background, I am president of the Tobes Group. We build affordable rental housing and workforce rental housing. We are big advocates of our community providing a wide range of housing types. We probably rival many nonprofits in providing affordable and workforce housing. We also financially support numerous nonprofits addressing this need and other health and human services needs in our community. But allowing campers, motorhomes, and other RV vehicles to park in residential areas is not a fair solution to those citizens' housing needs. Many neighborhood streets are ill-equipped, ill-sized, and not appropriate areas for this type of activity. There are no hookups or trash or sanitary services. These impacts are just as significant to the residents as they are to the users of the public parks, which I know prohibit RV parking in our neighborhood. Isn't it fair that I have the same consideration as a park user? In summary, there are legal, appropriate, and adequate areas for these citizens to park and camp without allowing it into all neighborhoods, which present an aesthetic, safety, and quality of life impact. Thank you very much.
Wanda Livernoise will be followed by Ken Oplinger, then Ethan Shakeman, Matt Labrie, Maggie Campbell, and Trey Pinner will be the final speaker.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I live downtown. It's not an entirely residential area, but I have had RV parkers on my park strip for a lot of time. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. They are entertaining. They're having a good time. Do you call the police every other day? I can't do that kind of stuff. You know, it's very hard to be the dissent and say you're not doing the right thing. They take up a lot of parking spaces. Many of them have support vehicles. They think if they're parking in front of a vacant building, it's just peachy keen. Well, that means that the people who might have a business across the street have no other place to park. Coming down De La Vina on West Coda, those streets are very narrow. I'm glad we're going to start doing something. They are not pleasant. They are not all lovely people that live in those things. Okay? Thanks.
Ken Oplinger.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ken Oplinger from the Chamber. I want to speak in favor of this, but I just want to go back and highlight the fact that the proposal that Council Members Rouse and Francisco have brought forward is specifically to give a tool to your staff. And it's a tool that's supposed to be used for safety issues. You saw the pictures that your staff put up that showed examples of how vehicles that are oversized on some of our smaller streets is a safety hazard. And so while I think that the broader discussion that's going on is important, we are happy to engage with you if you want to have longer-term discussions about this. Specifically tonight, this is a safety issue, and we're strongly in support of making sure that we're giving those tools to your staff so they can address the safety issues in the community. Thank you.
Ethan Shankman.
Madam Mayor, City Council, how are you doing today? I mentioned before that no statutory exclusion provide that the enterprise fund, and I mean the Downtown Parking Committee or its lots and structures, can accept fees, fines, and penalties from the handicapped and elderly, otherwise protected under the Social Security Act, any more than it is legal to have minors operate in a drinking establishment. Now, this would be an opportunity for the city attorney to say otherwise. And I don't think you do. Have some story about the Attorney General just being an attorney or attorney, what do you call that, an opinion not otherwise merit. You are charging against handicapped people, and that is illegal. With a 17% margin of those 65 and over locally, policies have put our mayor in a subjective path toward representing our interest in the congressional district, most explicitly over the issue of Medicare, where beneficiaries are already being specifically charged to participate with a municipal shuttle program and parking without federal mandate or state waiver. Instead of focusing on traffic safety concerns, the Parking Division emphasizes agenda that is more appropriate for parks and recreation, such as this case. And a complete separate Department of Public Works for bike trails and valet services would also be appropriate. And I would mention that on before that the panel is disproportionately represented by Downtown Organization, a private nonprofit agency where officer base is primarily comprised of real estate professionals that manage under a conflict of interest where clauses prohibit panelists to achieve financial gain. And they're going to be coming in to speak today, and I don't know whether they will be willing to address Maggie Campbell or Matt Labrie, how currently excessive surpluses are being reported while depleting capital reserves in an apparent effort to maneuver statistics that sustain real estate values. Thank you.
Matt Labrie.
Madam Mayor and council members, I wanted to speak to this issue with my property manager hat on. Anecdotally, I actually witnessed an accident at that area of De La Vina that Mr. Bailey showed you. And I do want to echo the comments of Mr. Oplinger that this is really a safety issue, and I appreciate the this going back to the ordinance subcommittee and being discussed. I think it would be a great step to continue this conversation. I hope that you go forward with moving it back into the discussion arena. And I do really appreciate Mr. Bailey coming with those concerns, and I think that it's important to acknowledge that staff sees this also as a concern.
Maggie Campbell.
Mayor, members of the City Council, Maggie Campbell, the Executive Director for Downtown Santa Barbara. I'm just going to share some observations on this particular issue. Our organization has not taken a formal position. Just a couple of observations. We do have streets all around the downtown that are narrow. I've observed it myself, and I find it interesting the legislation in Goleta is not specifically about recreational vehicles, but oversized vehicles, of which that would fit in the definition of. Because I think on many of our smaller streets, it's not the type of vehicle it is, but it's the size of it and the narrowness of the street that creates that safety concern. So this conversation might move better if we talk in terms of oversized vehicles and not specifically about RVs. But then I want to turn it around a little bit. And my other observation is primarily about being fairly new to Santa Barbara. I've been here a little over a year, and it wasn't that long ago. We were all here in the chambers with a lot of other people hearing all of the debate and all of the reasons why we should prohibit vacation rentals in residential areas. And all of those arguments, if you use some of those same arguments on this particular case, on this particular topic, they apply almost to a T in terms of protecting the residential neighborhoods, the approved uses in residential areas, commercial activities or camping uses in areas that are primarily residential. There's some parallels, I think, that I find somewhat interesting. So that's an anecdotal observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Trey Pinner. Be the final speaker.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, on this matter, a couple of things I wanted to address. One, as I mentioned in the previous item, I am on the Downtown Parking Committee, so we do get reports periodically about the parking in the Coda lot, in the Carrillo lot, so we do keep up on that. I'm glad to hear about that program, and I hope there are future discussions about that as a result of this ordinance discussion. I think the most important thing to look at here is obviously the safety concerns. The previous speaker just spoke to that in somewhat, of the safety concern of the public areas. These streets are public streets. We want to make sure they maintain a safe manner for all the public. And I think the idea of bringing this to the ordinance committee to look at increasing the latitude for the officials to be able to address problems, I think is appropriate at this time. You often hear the term unintended consequences as being a bad thing. But I actually think in this case, the idea of restricting the RV parking may take an unintended consequence to a good thing. Earlier, speaker talked about maybe there's some other ideas. As you narrow the scope of where RVs can park, it may actually increase the ideas of creating opportunities to solve that problem. So if you kind of have this haphazard way of letting parking now happen, if you restrict that, you may find situations or organizations and churches and whatnot come to you in your ordinance discussion about maybe we can solve the problem this way. So you may actually move the needle in a positive direction at the same time dealing with the safety concerns in the area. I did want to make one last comment. Someone mentioned about where do RV or visitors park who come to town with RV. I do believe that the waterfront parking lots do have designated spots for RVs, and there is the shuttle system from downtown, so people visiting Santa Barbara can park in the the waterfront lots, and use the shuttle system to downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. It's to the council. I have a question, Mr. Bailey. You see these all the time in parking lots where it's a short parking space and it says compact, right? I mean, it's because of the safety issue of big cars sticking out. Is that Who makes that decision and how?
Madam Mayor, generally the layout of parking lots, they're outside of the public right-of-way, so those approvals go through the City Planning, Community Development Department.
Okay, and do we have situations on streets where it's narrow, where we can, under current process, say, restrict some form of parking or another due to some kind of narrow streets, or can we already do something like that under our current code?
Madam Mayor, to my knowledge, the only provision in the vehicle code that allows for that is to restrict the height of vehicles approaching intersections. For more of an intersection sight line. I don't know of any provision that allows for us to restrict the overall size of the vehicle without an ordinance of the council.
All right, but you could red curb places and things like that you can...
That's an all-out prohibition, though.
Right, so it doesn't matter the width of the vehicle. Okay, that's just good information. Okay, it's to the council. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As this week is Thanksgiving week, I'm really glad that the subject came up about people who live in their cars and how difficult our housing situation is in Santa Barbara and how people are forced to live on the streets. And in that spirit, I'm glad to see people here today. Mr. Flax, been meaning to get to know you better since you went in charge of C3H. I like the idea of starting a discussion about people who live in their cars, people who live in RVs. Obviously, there are impacts to our city. Someone was talking about the district system, specifically the West Side and West Downtown does have people who live in their cars, and I'm looking forward to getting to know them and educating them about their rights and responsibilities. Nancy McCready and I last year when Ms. Duncan came to the Ordinance Committee, we went and talked to someone who was parking on Cliff Drive, and we found that it was a family whose dad was a gardener and he was out of work, and there was a car associated with the RV, and their daughter went to Santa Barbara High School and she slept in the car. So this was a family that was living in the RV and the car that was associated with it. That's not always the case. I knew the woman named Honey who used to park down by the Casa Esperanza, and understand there was some criminal behavior related to her residency down there. So there is a whole spectrum of people. And Sarah Miller McCune sent us a letter or an email on this subject. I'd like to ask her to, as a philanthropist, to fund a committee that would once again look at the RV situation in Santa Barbara and look for some solutions. We had a well-worded email from Jill Wallenstadt. I'm not sure how she says her last name, from the Rescue Mission. And she said, we might make more people homeless if we start enforcing more places where they cannot park. That's not to say that these folks don't need relief. You certainly need relief, not just the Upper East, but the Lower West and other places where there are impacts from people parking there. So I would like to move that we move this subject to C3H and start a conversation. On the other hand, I hear from Councilmember Rouse that there's traffic implications. I think there is. Mr. Bailey, thank you for those photographs. I'm not sure how long those two RVs were in that location together. Certainly, any amount of time was not comfortable for them. But I do think there's a call for a community discussion. There's a call for an outreach effort of some kind, a restorative approach to this problem in our city, and I certainly would be involved in an effort like that. And I am curious to know what else people are going to say here today. But certainly a registry of people who live in their cars and what the services that they need to get into permanent housing or to move on, which I think is what some people would like. I appreciate that. I really do. I'd like to look for solutions to this problem. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The item before us today is really very simple. It's a very simple change to an ordinance, and it really is about safety. And the issues that Councilmember Murillo is bringing up, this whole thing about social justice and social welfare and everything else, that is an enormous issue, and there are lots of problems in this society. And we in Santa Barbara are not going to solve all those problems. I have been party to these discussions as long as I've been on City Council, and we have not made very much progress. That's what I can tell you. And these things go around and around and around in circles. But what I can tell you, and you've heard it from all the people who've come to this meeting today, it is not a good thing to have people camping in front of your house, whether you own the house or whether you're a renter. It is abusive. Now, the people who are living like that, I don't think they mean to hurt people. I don't think most of them. I don't think they mean to hurt the neighborhoods, but that's what they're doing. Camping on the street is illegal. This is wrong. And yes, in the long term, that's a huge issue that has to be taken care of. That has to be solved one way or the other. But we have to remember the City of Santa Barbara is not a social welfare agency, though we've contributed towards that. That's not our business. One of our businesses is making sure that our neighborhoods are safe. So anyway, I got diverted there. I shouldn't have got diverted. The thing that is in front of us is very simple and very small, and I've been a part of too many of these discussions. That's how I got distracted. But let's not try to solve the world's problems today because we can't. Let's focus on the simple thing that's in front of us. Thank you.
Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll have a comment, but first of all, I'd like to move that we forward this issue to Ordinance Committee for further discussion, come back to Council.
Second.
Okay. And discussion is this. Yes, it is. We all got distracted over here, didn't we? This was a relatively simple thing. No one's trying to be criminalized or demonized in this move. This isn't about a social justice program. This is simply about a vehicle issue. It's about neighborhoods. It's about the quiet enjoyment of a neighborhood by those who live in that neighborhood, and they have the right to a certain amount of quiet enjoyment. And everybody's got rights. Everybody needs respect on all levels. And I think this community, to let myself get distracted for a moment, is one of the most charitable communities per capita that you can imagine. And I reject the fact that people accuse us of not being that way. I wish Mr. Marin was still here because it kind of upsets me that the first words out of his mouth are usually about a lawsuit. Rather than asking the city to work with you help work with the city. We're willing to listen. We're willing to go forward. Ms. Murillo is ready to have this discussion. That's fabulous. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a simple piece of latitude to give to our administrators to solve traffic and safety issues and to look for issues that maybe weren't anticipated in this ordinance. This is still one of the least restrictive ordinances up and down the California coast that we have right here. That is one reason why we have as many RVs as we do. So please, let us give our administrators the tools to help us do the right thing for our neighborhoods in Santa Barbara.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm very sympathetic to people that are working here and then have no other place to live except in their RV and then have to drive off. And I mean, that who could not be sympathetic to that? I don't think that warrants sacrificing a neighborhood, though, because for both safety and privacy reasons. I don't know anyone who lives, whether they rent or own, wants to suddenly have a new neighbor outside, not know who it is, this big thing occupying the curb. It just doesn't work in the neighborhoods. And so there should be some way to counteract that. And this revision that's proposed here is a way to do that, I think, as gently and as wisely as possible. So it has 100% my support, but I also would like to try to help those people that are in a situation where they have to live there, they want to work here, and they don't know what to do. My phone is, call me, please, and my door is open because I would like to know more how I can help you. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, I think, was, at least it was instructive to me, that the answer to my question about how much of the city is off limits at this point. And I think that's important, that continue to be part of the transparency, part of the discussion going forward, is how much of the city is off limits, and that would be part of the conversation. I do support the very focused proposal before us today makes sense. And coming back, I do, as I say, I want to make sure that we're staying transparent, and that I don't expect the signs to go up citywide, that there are no RVs nowhere, no how. But I think that to be able to go to narrow streets and places where there are safety concerns is definitely a place where I could see some restrictions on RVs. So I will be supporting the motion and look forward to the conversation being fleshed out in the future.
Mr. Hart?
I'll support moving the ordinance discussion to the ordinance committee, but I have to say, in all honesty, that this is anything but simple. The language in the council agenda report from Councilmember Rouse and Francisco says, any other land use deemed sensitive by the chief of police and the public works director. That is in the eye of the beholder. That's exactly what the ordinance committee is going to have to define. What does that mean? What does deemed sensitive? Sensitive isn't even the word safety. This is not going to be easy and simple for all of the reasons that all of the people spoke to today. And I think it's appropriate. I think it's important to do it. And I understand what the neighbors are concerned about. And it's going to be very difficult to define this, because I don't think there's a neighborhood that's going to volunteer to have RVs parked on it. And that's the problem.
I have a question for Angela, right, from New Beginnings. If you can, Amanda, I'm sorry. Could you come on up, please? The question is the number of churches in the Upper East neighborhood. Are they participating in the overnight program?
We have one church that is on the Upper East Side.
Can you put the mic down?
Yes,
there's
we
one
have,
church.
One church participating on the Upper East Side.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Okay. So I understand the concern. I don't think this is the solution to it. I don't know what deemed sensitive really means. I'm hearing both that this is a, quote, safety issue about traffic safety, but really it's about people who are living in their RVs for whatever reason, and that's having neighborhood impacts. And if that's really the problem, which I think that's what I'm understanding the problem to be by the public comments, then that's the issue we need to address. And the issue, and so the way to address the issue is to figure out a way for people to no longer have to live in an RV. And so, or at least to do it in a place, to be able to sleep safely in a place, in a program that we know is working. So to me, the way to get around to deal with the actual issue at hand would be to ask additional churches, maybe do a little more marketing, and the city can certainly help with that and work with New Beginnings on expanding the number of places. I would start in the Upper East. There are 12 that were listed here, and a couple of 3 lots there could take care of those 12 particular RVs off the streets and in a safe parking program, if they qualify, obviously. Looking at our own lots, if it's something that we can do administratively and doesn't have to come to council to increase the number of parking spaces that is deemed safe or whatever the criteria is. Relook at the garden lot. If that created a problem a few years ago, maybe the individuals that were creating the problem are no longer around and not creating a problem anymore. That's another issue. And really get to the concern at hand. My concern is of going to ordinance committee, figuring out what deemed sensitive is, the time, energy, and money spent in putting that together. If it passes, it's going to end up being chasing the problem around and not solving it. We're going to have signs go up in certain neighborhoods where there are complaints because that's deemed sensitive. Then that will stop the problem. Then we'll hear another neighborhood have those complaints. We'll put up more signs, and we're just chasing our tail. I understand and appreciate the frustration people have. I don't mean to undermine and diminish it. I understand the situation, but I frankly just don't see this to be a solution to that particular problem. So we don't govern C3H. We have two members who sit on the policy board, and I agree with Councilmember Murillo that we can ask Mr. Flax. I don't think we need a motion for that, but I think we can ask Mr. Flax to maybe put it on a future agenda and to start. And I know you've already started those discussions amongst the different committee groups, and please let us know as those are happening so we can participate. And I think that because that's more of a city issue. It'll be interesting to see, now that we brought up the issue of the legality of signs in Goleta, if that's. I hope I didn't get Goleta in any trouble, but we wanted to clarify that. So I'm not going to support the motion because I just frankly don't think it's going to create a lot of time, a lot of packed houses in here to create wording on a code that I just don't see is going to solve the issue. So I would rather solve the issue. I understand that some of my colleagues are saying this is very simple about a safety concern. If there's some traffic safety issue and there's another way we can deal with it, then I'm open to it. But that's not really what I'm hearing this is really about. So those are my comments. Ms. Murillo and then Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I forgot to mention that the Milpas Action Task Force has talked about the RVs that are parked down in the lower Milpas area. And one of the ideas that we're working with is asking the Neighborhood Advisory Council to hold a public workshop about RVs, because it's not just the east side, it's the west side and the downtown. The Neighborhood Advisory Council has a limited scope of geography. It doesn't take into account the Upper East. But I just wanted the public to know that this is something that we talk about in our city government groups, and I would still like to push for that. Councilmember Hotchkiss is also on the Milpas Action Task Force. I think White and Hart are on the NAC, the Neighborhood Advisory Council. I really do want to work on that in the new year, finding solutions, what you're talking about, Madam Mayor. So we're going to post on Islay and Valerio, and the RVs are going to move over to Pedregosa. So let's really find solutions. And I'm willing to do the hard work and really help the city and help our residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Francisco?
Thank you. I think actually this ordinance is very, very simple. I don't think the discussion at Ordinance Committee should take too long, and I assume it would be easily approved at this council. And Madam Mayor, I understand. I agree with your point that if we post certain places, the RVs under the current regime will go somewhere else, and somebody else will have a problem, and they'll ask for a sign. I agree with you on that, but I also think that I believe you vastly underestimate the complexity of providing a social welfare system for everybody who wants to live in an RV in Santa Barbara. That is a monumental task. And I think it's beyond anything that this city council could contemplate. So I
Anyway, well, we're voting on
I'm
this.
not
that.
suggesting we create a whole new social system. We're not the county. We don't have the mental health department, the social service department. They have their own issues, and I hope those who care about what we're seeing in people who in need also help the county in the funding needs that they have for those concerns. So that's a whole different topic. But we have a motion on the floor, and that is to I guess move to the ordinance committee the item as presented by in this agenda item. Yeah, so we know what the motion is, correct? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Opposed.
Okay, so that's 5-2 with Murillo and Schneider opposed. Okay, thank you very much. We have council member committee assignment reports. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to report.
Please take your conversations outside. We still have a council meeting. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hotchkiss.
I'll wait for silence here. I'm happy to report that High Sierra Grill is about to open out at the airport, replacing the Elephant Bar, if you remember. And secondly, from the Milpas Action Task Force, I don't recall the NAC suggestion that Ms. Murillo was saying, but maybe she has a better memory than I do, but certainly not at the last session where I was. The one thing that came up was trying, or among other things, one thing we were trying to figure out to control some of the youth problems there, one of which is kids hanging out around the schools because they have Wi-Fi access, of all things. So obvious suggestion was after 10 o'clock, they should be home anyway, so let's turn off the Wi-Fi access. So I've asked Dave Cash to look into that, and I think that's what he's doing, and that's could be an easy solution.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Santa Barbara Restaurant and Lodging Association for holding a reception celebrating the election results. And it was very nice to socialize with everyone and look ahead to how we can help the business community in the new year and the rest of our terms. Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I failed to report last session that I had attended the COMB meeting and had a couple of interesting bits there. One is an emergency stabilization project was undertaken to the Kachuma conduit actually got exposed in Mission Creek by the Tennis Club of Santa Barbara, and a project was effected to put in protection to that to the conduit in the creek in anticipation of El Nino, and that was accomplished. And then secondly, and this kind of just a head scratcher to me, that the stakeholders have paid off their debt, our debt, to the Bureau of Reclamation for Kachuma Reservoir. And now I don't know how much that was to begin with, but it was $1 million a year that was being paid down. It was 60 years and at $1 million a year. I do not know what the local share was of that reservoir, what $60 million meant as a share of that reservoir. It'd be kind of interesting to see what inflation has been and how that fed into the total cost of that project. But that at least it's pretty amazing when a mortgage we get to burn a mortgage these days. It doesn't happen often enough, and I thought that was a pretty cool thing to experience.
So I am currently now on the board of the League of California Cities, having been past chair of the Channel Counties Division, and they had their first meeting, or I had my first board meeting last week in Thursday and Friday in Sacramento, and lots of really good information. We were talking about the initiatives about legalizing marijuana and state funding, and so there's a lot of good information. And so obviously if there are issues you'd like to bring forward to the League of Cities on a policy level, I can now do that as a board member. So that was very handy. And we just put together a strategic planning which had to do with infrastructure funding, affordable housing, and also dealing with something to do with net taxes or taxation issues. One of the things, though, I will say, and I'll report back is we were talking about the marijuana potential, what they're calling non-medical use, not recreational. That's the new term, non-medical use. There's a lot of negotiations back and forth of the final language that might be put forward to a vote, and right now the language does include the ability for municipalities to tax non-medical use of marijuana if they so choose, and to still have local control in relation to storefront dispensaries and cultivation and things that we were talking about. So that's, I thought that was very encouraging that that's still part of the conversation. Okay, with that, I believe, yes, we are adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
While they were dancing, did he whisper things in her ear? And did he light her cigarette? Was he attentive? The way he used to be with me, and what was she like? Was she attractive? And was there a smile upon his face? Or did he look bored? Not that I really care. I know a love affair could never be. But how did he look? And did he ask about me?